Hey guys, Tex from the future here. Upon having finished kind of splicing this video together for putting on YouTube, I just wanted to apologize in advance for the shitty audio quality that you are hearing and are going to hear. I recorded this with my gaming headset because I wanted to be able to stand up and walk around while talking, and this is all I had to be able to do that. I have a wireless gaming headset. So, with that said, I'll just let the video play. What I'm going to attempt to do here is talk about The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. I'd like to kind of just start talking because there are so many things that I want to there's so many things that I want to say about this game that to actually like sit down and write out a video would just be too difficult, I think, and just not something I feel like investing the time in. Um, so I've been playing Breath of the Wild for the last like 7 days or so, pretty much nonstop. So yeah, I guess the best starting place would be to think about what is different about this Zelda game versus the others. So the one word answer that anyone would give you, and you ask them what is different about this Zelda from other Zeldas, the one word answer to that is uh, it's an open world game, right? But I think that's a little bit reductive. And the reason I think it's reductive is because I think that open world is a little more nebulous of a genre descriptor as people think it is. The way I kind of see it is that any video game that involves exploration, like of any sort, is always going to fall on this spectrum that I kind of have in my head. And so on this spectrum, I think on the left side you have Metroidvania, and on the right side you have open world. And the real difference between those two things is is just the constriction, right? In an open world game, you have a big kind of blob that you can explore and go in any direction you want. And in a Metroidvania, you have more of a labyrinthine kind of tunnel situation. And with that comes a more interconnected world, a world that seems more like constructed, and it is more constructed. The challenge of an open world game, and something that up until like very recently, um, a failing of open world games, I think, is the fact that they're more decoration than level design. When you're trying to make a big world that has content everywhere, you tend to stop thinking about the little details and you start to think about how can we decorate this place and make it not look and make it look worth exploring. They're thinking about how to make a world look worth exploring. They're not thinking about how to make the world actually worth exploring. They're just worried about making it look worth exploring. Do you see what I mean? See the difference? And with a Metroidvania, and I'm not saying that something is a Metroidvania that might not be. Like there's a lot of exploration based games that I'm sure you wouldn't think of as Metroidvania, but are closer to Metroidvania on the spectrum than they are open world, right? Um, like Dark Souls is more on the Metroidvania side, because you're kind of limited. It is kind of freeform in a way. You can go in a bunch of different directions most of the time, but you figure out that this is kind of a labyrinthine thing that's wrapping back in on itself, and if every very much intentional. All the paths you're going to take, even though you made a decision on which path to take, is like one of the designed paths to take, right? No matter where you go, you're on something that the developers thought about. Whereas if you're in an open world game, you're on something that the developers just kind of like, you're on basically like a slab of space that the developers have filled with stuff because they don't know where you're going to go. This Zelda game is very hard to place on that spectrum. Very, very hard to place. Because on the one hand, it is 100% an open world game. You can go in any direction that you want. But on the other hand, the game is very cleverly designed where you're usually going to be doing something that's intentional anyway. Even if like you thought it was your idea, even if it seems something completely random, like you climbed up this mountain and then you went and then you saw a path and you jumped on the path for a while, but then you saw something on the side in the forest, so you went into the forest for a while. And this might all seem like you're making those decisions, and you are, but it's also something that I really think in most cases the Nintendo had thought of when they made this game. They were working on this game for 5 fucking years. Um, and you gotta wonder what were they doing all that time because you can tell there were some like difficulties in this development process. This production started when the Wii U first came out, and it took this long for it to come out. That's incredible. That's like Half-Life 2 levels of like delay. So like I was listening to Super Bunny Hop's podcast, the TOVG podcast, and one of the guys in that podcast was kind of comparing it to The Witness actually in what it does with your perspective. And I think he's onto something here in the way that it kind of guides your attention. That's what they do. The reason that you have no idea that Nintendo kind of intended you to do this, and yet they did, is they messed with perspective. So what they did is they made this entire world of Hyrule extremely mountainous. Like there's a lot of ups and downs all over the place. And I think that the reason that they did that is to direct your attention in certain areas. So like as an example, say you're on a path, some path, and to the left of you, what you're going to see, let's say, is a cliff, just a mountain that goes up from where you can see. So if you look to the left, you might see a few things in front of the cliff, but there's going to be a cliff, let's say, that rises above you, that goes way above you, so you can't see anything. There's probably all sorts of fun stuff at the top of the cliff. There's probably a repeat of like the same thing I'm about to give an example of here. There's probably another version of what I'm about to say. So say you're on a path and there's a cliff to your left, and you look at the cliff and you don't see past the cliff. That cliff is a wall that limits what you're able to see and process. And to the right, let's say, I don't want to say cliff again. Let's say that there's like a big open field or something. And you can see everything in the field. Maybe there's like a small like patch of forest or like a pond or something that seems interesting. There could be all sorts of little things. But at the end of the open field, let's say there's going to be something, and it's usually because they made this world so mountainous. It's usually either going to be a cliff that goes up or a drop off, like a plateau that goes down. Either way, you're not seeing anything past that point. So even though you're on this path and the world is yours and you can go in any direction you want, at any given moment, Nintendo is able to, without too much trouble, it's still an impressive feat, but without too much trouble, still control what you're able to see. And to some extent, because of that, control your decision making. They can direct your attention very cleverly because they made the simple and elegant decision to just kind of make the open world so mountainous, so vertical. Um, and it really shows when you get to like the top of the towers because the game is split into these 12 provinces, and each province has a tower. And I'll talk more about the maps later on. But each area has a tower, and you get to the top of the tower, and you immediately get the sense that like everything you're seeing is stuff that you're meant to see by going to the top of this tower. Whatever direction you go next, it's just going to be a repeat of this process where no matter where you're standing, Nintendo always has some control over what you're able to see. And they have control over you because of that. It's a very clever way to make an open world game less of an open world game and feel more like the other version, feel more like the Castlevania-y thing. I'm not sure. Okay, maybe like it's not that hard to place on the spectrum. It's definitely more of an open world game, but it's still very interesting what they managed to do with this. Now, I haven't played a lot of open world games, especially recently. I've played a lot of open world games, but not a whole lot of them recently. I'm a few years behind, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Like I played all the basics. I played Skyrim. I played Grand Theft Auto. I played all of those kinds of games, but more recently, I know a lot of other really cool open world games have come out that I haven't gotten to. Specifically, I'm thinking about The Witcher right now. I know there's a few others that I can't think of also. I can't. They're on the tip of my tongue. But like I know there's. Oh, Metal Gear Solid 5. That's the other one. Yeah. So those two games I haven't played, and I know those were kind of like borderline revolutionary as open world games as well. So I'm not sure how much Zelda does originally here, but I can bet that whatever Zelda does well with its open world design is something probably different than what they get right in those games because Nintendo doesn't communicate with other companies. They don't take influence from other companies. They're just you can count on Nintendo to be completely oblivious to whatever everyone else is thinking because they just don't give a shit. Um, so I'd be surprised if the way that Nintendo pushes their open world the way Nintendo pushes open world games forward is in a different kind of push than the whatever Konami did and whatever CD Projekt Red, is that what they are, did with The Witcher. So I think I can safely talk about it as if Zelda's doing these things um, as a first, even though I haven't played those games. Maybe I'm wrong. You can tell me if I'm wrong. Anyway, So in the past, the way the Zelda games have been structured in 3D up until now is that they've kind of fallen very comfortably in the middle of that spectrum I described between Castlevania and open world. Because what you've got with a Zelda game is essentially, it's always been this, some kind of open world hub that connects to a bunch of little Metroidvania games. Those little Metroidvania games being dungeons. Um, and in that way, they can give you both sensations at once. And that's immediately one of the primary strengths of the Zelda games um, altogether, is because they satisfy a lot of the different things that you want out of a video game at the same time. Or maybe not even exactly the same time, but back and forth so that you're always entertained in different ways. Right? Everybody loves both parts of Zelda. They love the dungeons and they love the above ground stuff because I mean honestly, if you were missing the overworld in a Zelda game, then you wouldn't really be able to describe dungeons anymore, and you would pretty much have Metroid Prime or just Metroid. Right? Think about having just the dungeons connecting to other dungeons. You would just be playing Super Metroid at that point. So when I first heard that Zelda was going open world, that that's what they wanted to do, um, I was a little bit. I didn't. I was a bit like I wasn't. It made me nervous, is what it made me, because I didn't care that much about Zelda going open world. I know open world people tend to like. I know that people are kind of getting out of this mentality right now, but for a long time, gamer culture has been in this kind of sensation where the word linear implied bad, and the word the word open world implied good. And I think people are starting to warm more up to the idea of a linear game now than they were before. But at the same time, it kind of seems like a meme. The reason that people got excited about this new Zelda game was just because of this like open world meme that making anything open world equals making it better. And I just sincerely disagree with that. Choice is a nice idea of something to have in a video game, but like anything else in a game, you have to ask yourself, why am I giving them choice? Is it worthwhile to the benefit of this game to give the player choice? But yeah, giving the player a choice of multiple dungeons by itself, which is seems to be what they've really wanted to do for a long time now, is they want players to be able to do any of the dungeons in any order. And I really don't see the point of that. I really don't see what's important about that. If anything, I would have always thought it's more important to yeah, let the players enter the dungeons if they want. But if there's an intended order, there's an intended order, and I don't really see what is gained by having the player just be able to pick from seven things. Um, you know what I mean? I never really cared that much. I wasn't like against it, but I certainly wasn't for it either. So their first attempt at this was with A Link Between Worlds, and that game was, in my opinion, a failure at what it wanted to do. It's not a bad game. A lot of people are going on 4chan right now and saying, "Oh yeah, it's not a bad game, but it's a bad Zelda game." No, 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 no. Link Between Worlds is what you're talking about. A Link Between Worlds is a bad game, but not a bad Zelda game. Wait, the other way around. It's a bad game. It's a bad Zelda game, but it's a good game. What I mean by that is that their solution to letting you do any of the dungeons in any order was too extreme and made the game dumb. They like they had the dungeons kind of just strewn around the world, and you could go to them in any order. So you'd go to this dungeon, and it would have a symbol for the item you needed at the dungeon, like in front of the dungeon. It would just be this tile that said, "You need this," just a sign that says, "You need this." So you would go back to your house, and there'd be this asshole living at your house, just mooching. Literally, just lives in your house. I think they make some jokes about it or something. I don't remember. Oh wait, actually, I think there was a cool plot twist with that guy. Anyway, um, there is a guy living at your house. Maybe he's not that big of an asshole. Whatever. But he is renting you your items. He has all of the items that you're going to need, and he basically like lends them to you for rupees. And so you would get the item that was the symbol on the dungeon, and then you'd go back to the dungeon, and you would use that item in the dungeon. And what this did is it exemplified a problem that all of the Zelda games have been having, and a problem that has been getting worse and better and worse and better for so long now. Um, which is the way items are used in a Zelda game. And I'm definitely like leaving open world for a while I get to this. But I think what Zelda gains or doesn't gain from being an open world game is very much connected to its use of tools and puzzles. So it's hard to like separate these two things. But I guess that's what I'm talking about now is items. So this problem with items is that um, a lot of items in a Zelda game get used in the dungeon that you find them. Like you find an item in the dungeon and you have all these cool things to do with the item, and then the item, depending on what it is, items tend to fall off after the dungeon. Like you use the item a lot in the dungeon, you get it, but then it just doesn't get much use after you were done there. And you could chalk this up to the item not being a good item, right? Like if the item was too much of a novelty, then yeah, the player would naturally never see a reason to use it outside of the dungeon. So you can chalk this design problem up to a bad item, but that's not always the case. Case in point is the spinner. Everyone fucking loves the spinner. The spinner, when most people think back to Twilight Princess and think about what they enjoyed about that game, I think the spinner would show up on most people's like highlights lists of that game. It's not a bad item. It's a cool as hell item, but you also have to admit it gets barely any use after the dungeon that you get it in, and it's unfortunate. And it's hard to say why this problem oscillates so much, because certain Zelda games have it and certain Zelda games have it much less. But I'm not sure any Zelda game has really fixed the problem, and it's a problem that I've always kind of worried about. So maybe the biggest offender, every game has some items that are offender here and some items that aren't. It tends to be that the items that you get later on that are the bigger offender here. For instance, like Twilight Princess, first they give you the Gale Boomerang, then they give which is a boomerang. It's useful enough. You don't use it that often, I guess, but it's not. I don't really view it as part of this problem. Boomerang, then it gives you like the boots that are like magnetic, and those things are awesome. And then it gives you the bow and arrow, and then it gives you the hook shot. And these are all good items that you're going to use pretty much the whole game. But then you get to that second half, and what do you find? You find the spinner. Okay. You find the ball and chain. Okay. You get a second claw shot. That's actually pretty fucking cool. The fact that you get a second claw shot. That was a step in the right direction, I think, is getting an item and then building on that item's complexity. And that was taken to another extreme in Skyward Sword, with the what is it called? The beetle. But I'm getting ahead of myself. But yeah, you can talk about this problem in a lot of other Zelda games too. Majora's Mask doesn't have it that bad because there's only 4 dungeons, and the dungeons are super complicated. In fact, I think Majora's Mask probably does it the best out of all of these, especially with the last dungeon, which uses literally everything you've ever done throughout the game. The reverse vacuum cleaner from Skyward Sword, whatever that was, the thing that blew. That item didn't blow, but it blew. And that's only interpretable in one direction. Yeah, it's a fun item. It's fun to pretend you're playing Luigi's Mansion for a while, but like, when do you use that item past the dungeon that you get it in? Anyway, I guess okay. I was talking about A Link Between Worlds. A Link Between Worlds exemplifies this problem in its attempt to go open world, and that means that going open world was not worth it. Like, if you can only expect players to have bombs in one dungeon, and the player knows what dungeon that is, then you're just have a bunch of rooms that the player walks into, and he's like, okay, how do I use bombs in here? He's not thinking critically about the situation. He's not being like, oh man, maybe I can manipulate this thing or this thing with this thing that I got like a while ago or anything like that. They're just being like, okay, what do I bomb? What do I shoot an arrow at? And that's not a good mentality for puzzle solving. It doesn't make the player feel clever. It makes the player feel like they're kind of at a novelty shop being shown things. And you could argue that there's no real difference, but I think that everybody who has items that they like want to be using those items throughout the game. And so let's say the player in The Link Between Worlds likes a particular item they get. Goodbye. Like, that was your time to shine item, and now you can maybe wait for Ganon's castle, I guess, if you want to see this used again. Like, it's sad, especially there's only like one real item that's super cool in that game besides the going 2D on a wall, which is awesome. But that's the sand rod, or I think it is the sand rod. It's basically an item that lets you lift up sand pillars, and it's the spinner of that game. It's a fucking awesome item in the best dungeon in the game, and then you never use it again because there's only one desert, and there's only one place where there's sand. So you're not going to be able to use the sand rod anywhere else. But I think Nintendo saw that the sand rod was the coolest thing in that game because they brought it back in this game, sort of. Um, so from that game, after playing that game, I was really worried when I heard that Breath of the Wild wanted to be an open world game and do similar things to what A Link Between Worlds was, because I thought The Link Between Worlds was a failure in what it was trying to do. It wanted to give the players more choice without really knowing why it wanted to give them more choice. I mean, maybe it knew why, but in giving them that, they made the dungeons too simple and kind of amplified a different problem that the Zelda games had been having. So I would say not worth to that regard. And I think that that's something, and I would have said after playing that game, if you had asked me, can Zelda games go open world maintaining the same complexity in the puzzle solving that they've been known for, I would have said no. There was no way to do that, and I kind of don't feel like Nintendo should be trying to. After playing this game, I am completely wrong, and their solution is so elegant and simple, and I'm you immediately get it within the first hour. They What they do in this game is rather than like have a bunch of dungeons with items in front of the dungeons or any bullshit like that, what they literally do is they just front load you with all of the important tools in the first hour. They say, okay, here's everything you're going to be using, and they consolidate it in a few really it's only like 4 tools, which sounds super simplistic, but it's actually not. The tools themselves are really multifaceted, really natural to use. They interlink with each other, and there's a lot of subtleties to all of them. Um, so they give you some really cool tools, and there's other tools too. There's things that you're just generally going to have. You're going to have the bow all the time. It's wired to a button. Same thing with uh, the hammer is a hammer. The melee weapon slot has a lot to it, but I'll talk about these tools first that they front load you with. But that's a super elegant solution to this problem that Link Between Worlds has. They do this. They immediately do open worlds better than that game, because in order to keep their puzzles complicated and keep the player thinking critically, they just give them all of the tools that they're going to need off the bat, so that they know wherever the player goes in this open world, they're going to we can expect them to have these. And I guess it's even clever, like the way that they make sure that you do those first, because the way that you start the game is the same way you play the rest of the game. The only difference is that you start in this island, basically. You start at this like at the plateau of this cliff, where you're guaranteed to run out of stamina and fall and die, until this old man up there trades you his paraglider. And in order to get the paraglider, you have to do all of the shrines on this world. So what they basically start you off on is an island that is very much a part of the bigger open world, but is itself a smaller kind of like mini version of what the game is going to be. And in that time, they introduce the player one by one to all of these tools, and then they hand them the paraglider and they say, okay, here's the real world, and now you have all these tools that we know that you have, that we know that we can expect you to have, so we can ask you to use for the rest of the game. That is so brilliant in its simplicity, so brilliant in solving these problems that I was saying before, and getting that just made me feel so much better right off the bat about what this game is going to be. Um, so let's talk about what these tools are and how interesting they are and how they really do change this Zelda and gave it a very unique flavor. Um, all of the Zelda games kind of have a theme to them to some extent. I mean, you can say gimmick, you can say theme. You can't really say gimmick in this game, and maybe you can't say gimmick in general anymore. Because what is a gimmick? A gimmick is this like novelty, but I think if it's implemented well, it won't even feel like a gimmick, right? Yeah, isn't like kind of just isn't any cool theme in a game, whatever. All the Zelda games have a gimmick, and I think that the gimmick of this game, if you had to pick something out, if I had to pick something out, would be um, mastering the elements. You have this big untamed world, and you are responsible for claiming ownership over it through kind of not science, but like knowledge. You are learning how to be the master of this crazy world that you're in. And when I say elements, I mean elements. I mean like objects on the ground. I mean like fire, ice, and electricity. You are taming these things. You're taming these like primal properties of the world in kind of the story and actions of the game. And that mirrors what the player is doing by playing the game, because they're just exploring. They're just trying to learn the game and get good at it. So the player's motivations and Link's motivations, and just kind of the motivations of how everything, it just all goes in the same direction. It feels great. Um, and most people won't even think of it as a gimmick. I mean, I'm not even sure I'm right about this being the gimmick if Nintendo thinks that way when they're designing these games. But all of these initial tools that they give you, or at least three of them, mirror, not mirror, but like reflect this theme of conquering the elements. So bear that in mind. Anyway, the first thing they give you does not connect to what I'm saying, really. It's just bombs. They give you bombs. The twist of bombs in this game is that they are you have two types of bombs. You have spherical bombs and cubic bombs, and the only real difference between those two is that the spheres roll and the cubes kind of don't roll. They kind of stop quickly. Which at first glance seems like a big downgrade from what Skyward Sword was doing with its bombs, the way you could roll them and like angle the roll and stuff. But I mean, I can see why that's hard to emulate on a controller now. But it's kind of sad to see that go. But what they replaced it with is a nice little thing that changes everything about bombs. This game actually really does have a unique twist to bombs, not with the cube bombs and the round bombs, but with the fact that they are no longer something that blow up over time after a certain amount of time passes. They're just wired to a detonator. So if you throw a bomb out, it will not explode until you press the button, which feels great. Pressing that button, you see it happen, like Link like punches the thing on a sheet of slate. Um, it kind of feels like you're fucking that guy from JoJo. What's his name? Uh, shit, Kira. Yeah, like you know how cool it feels to press the trigger on a bomb for some reason if you've watched that show. It's a good feeling. It's a good feedback. It's a good game feel. Anyway, um, and the other thing that's important, the other really subtle little detail about the bombs that you won't really realize until like halfway through the game, maybe some players won't ever realize it, is that the bombs are actually wired to separate detonators. You have two different types of bombs, and they're set to different cooldowns and different detonators. So if you throw a cube bomb out, and then you can throw a round bomb out at the same time without deleting the cube bomb, and if you hit the detonator on the cube bomb, the round bomb won't blow up. Only the cube bomb will blow up. And there's a few puzzles and shrines that use that. Not enough of them, but it is cool to kind of have like control over like the order in which you detonate multiple things. If they gave you like maybe one more bomb, you could set up some really interesting puzzles with that. But two is okay. It's cool. I wish they used that aspect of them more, but that's pretty much all there is to say about the bombs. More to say than normal bombs. It's not like just normal bombs, but it is bombs. So anyway, so the next thing that they give you, or it's not, they don't give you these in any particular order, but the next one I'm going to talk about is what they did with the sand pillars from Link Between Worlds. Those pillars were cool. Basically, wherever there was a sand pile in that game, you could use this like magic rod and make a pillar of sand come out of the ground that you could like use as a platform. And um, this game does that with water instead. They said, okay, this is a fun idea, but we can't put sand everywhere. But what is everywhere? Oh shit, water is everywhere. So wherever there's water, you can make a pillar of ice come out of the ground. Or actually, it doesn't even have to be water. Any liquid at all, you can make a pillar of ice come out from that. And you use that for all sorts of interesting things. You can use that to jump as platforms to jump on if you don't want to swim, which you don't because you swim fucking slow in this game. Holy shit. You can use them to like fish out things from the water, like loot that's dropped from enemies that have been killed. You can use it to lift up like gates if the gates have been on the ground. You don't do that very often. You can use that to like plug pipes in this one dungeon that's like very pipe themed. I'll get to the dungeons in a bit. You use it. It's cool. It's what's good about it as a tool is it's something that you're always going to be remembering that you have. It's a very easy thing to remember that you have because it's natural to use it. It feels natural to think of solutions with this kind of a tool. It's very multifaceted, just like everything else. So it's a great little tool. The other thing they give you is, the next thing they give you is probably the most novel and interesting tool in this game is stasis. Basically, the next two abilities kind of, well, actually all three of these, the water-based thing, I'll explain the scanning, but basically you tap L and you start scanning the world for certain objects. Most, pretty much everything in the game, it will be highlighted yellow. Any entity gets highlighted, and you can basically tap A on that like game entity and freeze it in time. And that in itself is pretty cool. But the really cool part is that, and this is completely legit. When I say it this way, I mean it this way. And there's some like repercussions to that. While the thing is frozen in time, it stores any kinetic energy applied to it that it receives. It's a closed system, so whatever kinetic energy it receives while it's frozen will all be applied at once when the thing comes out of stasis, and in whatever direction, whatever vector direction that would imply. So like you'll actually, and they show you the vector when the thing is like, so when the thing is frozen in time, let's say that you hit that thing with a hammer, you'll get an arrow that points in the direction that you hit it from. So if you hit something the way that it would normally go, you get an arrow kind of in that direction, and the arrow gets bigger based on like how intense it's going to go in whatever direction you're hitting it repeatedly. So basically, you can freeze something in time, and then make sure that when it comes out of the time, it's going to be going at whatever velocity you want in whatever direction you want. And the fact that it's kinetic energy and not like force matters a lot. Think about this. For instance, say you have an explosive barrel. If you freeze that explosive barrel in time with stasis, and you hit it a bunch of times, some people might think that logic would dictate that the thing would just immediately explode when you come out of the stasis, but that's not what happens. Because it only stores the kinetic energy. It doesn't like apply the force initially. So, which means that the thing would just go. What happens in the game, and what should happen, is it goes flying in the direction, and then the force applies with whatever it ends up hitting into. So you can use stasis to like launch missiles at people with explosive barrels. You can also use it to like transport yourself. You can like find a big cube and then like hit it a bunch of times with stasis and then get on top of it or attach yourself to it and then just go flying. You can do all sorts of cool shit with stasis. And then lastly, it gives you magnesis. Magnesis is a little more specific. Basically, it's a way that the game can kind of give you things in the world that you can manipulate. Basically, anything that's metal in the game, you can grab with magnesis and pick up and move around and do stuff with. You can even use this. You can even use stuff as a weapon. You can smack people with it. The one thing you can't do is like if you can't grab a block from below yourself if you're on top of it and make yourself go and just like levitate through the game. I don't think that would even work from a science standpoint anyway. I'm not really sure why. I don't feel like it would work anyway. But yeah, that's the only thing you can't really do with it. What's cool about this skill is that the weight doesn't matter. It like how much the thing like you can manipulate everything exactly the same, no matter how big or small it is. There's some cool implications to that as well. Like any force that thing takes, you don't feel. So there's like one puzzle where there's a bunch of rolling boulders that are like rolling really fast down this tunnel that you have to get through. And what you have to do is grab a metal boulder from this other kind of little area, put it in front of all these rolling boulders, and then just run forward. And because you don't feel the force that the boulder is feeling, the boulder just pushes the other 4 boulders ahead of itself. And I don't know, it's cool. It's a more subtle style of tool in a Zelda game than I'm used to, and I appreciate that. It makes the puzzles feel closer to something like Portal than they do a traditional Zelda game. They feel more scientific, and all of them involve manipulating, with the exception of bombs, all of them involve manipulating the environment in some way, which is kind of playing back into that theme that I mentioned, which is mastering the elements, getting control over the elements. And the other things that reflect this are the dungeons. The dungeons are, you might be surprised to hear, are actually not like that behind a loading screen. I think they might be, but that's only to like conserve resources. Like you'll see them crawling all over the map. There are these kind of like mechanical animal things that have been hacked. Basically, the story of this game, 100 years ago, like Hyrule was like assembling all of this like ancient technology to try to like harness it and use it against Ganon in this final battle. But then Ganon was a totally sick hacker and hacked all of the technology and then destroyed all of Hyrule with it. Obviously they don't say he's a sick hacker, but that is pretty much the story. Um, so you've got and the four main like things that were being prepped to use against Ganon are the dungeons. They're these giant robot animal things that all serve a different destructive purpose that have gone haywire and are like just kind of like wandering around the map. And your job in this game is to go inside of all of them and kind of reactivate it and like kind of wash out whatever like corruption is inside of them. And you can see them from the very beginning of the game. Maybe not all of them, but I think everyone will see the bird like within the first hour or so. They'll notice it. And that bird is the dungeon. There's no like load screen between like you and going inside of the bird. You can go inside the bird and then look back out, and you can see everything. And I didn't try jumping, but I don't feel like you. I don't think you. I don't think that it would matter. I think you could just jump out and then just go back to exploring. Like, that is so impressive. Question is, were sacrifices made in like the dungeon size to allow that to be possible? And the answer is definitely. Definitely, the dungeons have never been shorter in a Zelda game. You can't even almost call these dungeons. They are what this game has in place of dungeons. Well, they're one of two things this game has in place of dungeons. But yeah, performance-wise, I'm pretty sure that their need to make they really wanted to make the dungeons a natural part of this world, and because of that, they had to make the dungeons smaller. And even still, some of the dungeons lag horribly. The best dungeon of the game, the desert one, is good luck getting anything past 20 frames a second in there on either console, I think, which is a shame because that is the best dungeon that I've played. I haven't done the fourth one. I haven't done the Goron one yet, but I've done the other three. Where I am at now in the game is that I've done 3 of the 4 divine beasts and about 90 shrines. I think exactly 90 shrines, and I've been to every like province at this point too. So I'm far enough in that I think I can like say this stuff, but I haven't finished it yet. So the thing about mastering the elements again that I was getting back to is you have to go inside of these animals and kind of manipulate them and get them working again, and all of them are powered by something different, and so each dungeon kind of feels like you are like reclaiming some kind of like technological idea for humanity or like elvanity or whatever, like back to Hyrule, but using your brain. It's a really cool theme. I really like it. It took me a while to notice it, but now that I see it, I really like it. What I mean by that is that all of the divine beasts are powered by a different kind of fuel source. So you've got one divine beast that is all like water based, like it's powered by fluid dynamics. You have pipes that kind of feed into stuff, and like the flow of the water is what dictates how this thing moves. And that dungeon is, of course, the Zora dungeon. And you basically have to get it working again by like clogging pipes, unclogging pipes, like making water wheels turn, just manipulating water-based distribution and power. And then you've got another dungeon. You've got the desert dungeon, this like camel. And the camel is like, that one is powered by electricity. So that dungeon has you completing circuits actually. Like that's the best dungeon. It's cool as hell because that dungeon is just the puzzles of the dungeon are arranged as a big circuit diagram, and you're basically just like assembling this big circuit that powers the whole thing. And like each room feeds into other rooms because it's all part of the same circuit, but there's also closed networks that like involve solving specific puzzles. It's really cool. It's legit circuitry that you're doing, like on like a broad scale as you try to power this giant camel. What else? The bird is obviously wind power, and then I haven't gotten to it yet, but I'd imagine that this big lizard crawling over the volcano is going to be like combustion, like using a bunch of fire stuff to like. But it's still powers. Like they're all powered by different power sources, and those theme the dungeons. And when you take back that like giant beast to aid you in the fight against Ganon, it feels like you are mastering like some essential like property of like technology and like like power over the world around you. That's what it feels like to get these things working again slowly. Um, like you see the effect you're having on the game because these monsters that were crawling all over the world, the biggest things on the entire map, are suddenly on your side and just kind of parked waiting for you to go into that castle, and you can see it everywhere you go on the map. They're the biggest landmarks, not the biggest landmarks, but they're the biggest like monstrous things that you could see moving around. They're bigger than the dragons, and they're these really cool looking dragons that are like moving around the world too. Um, by the way, spoiler warning. You probably you know, I don't really care that much about spoilers myself. Well, I do, but I'm sure if you did care, you wouldn't be watching this right now, or you've already played the game too, and you just want to know what I have to say about it. So, let's just summarize what I've said so far, because I want to wrap this up because I'm getting tired, but I'll continue. Obviously, there's going to be like a second, maybe even third part to this at this point. Um, this Zelda wanted to be an open world game, and I think that it justified that. I hadn't felt like Nintendo had justified the need to make it an open world game yet. I do after playing this. Um, I think that in terms of the concessions with the wielding tools that they've made to make this an open world game, what they did to like make tools and like complexity of the puzzles like this consistent with other Zelda games, despite being an open world game, I think was a massive success to the point where even if the rest of the Zeldas aren't open world games like this one, I'd still rather have the tools done this way, where they front load you with everything, because um, it just makes you think more critically. You're never going to have that thing going through your head that I mentioned, where it's like, okay, how am I going to use this tool in this room now? You know it's going to be this tool because you just got this tool. This game, it's like, oh man, like what in here is made of metal? Where's the water? Like, what can I do here? That kind of thinking is way more interesting, way more fun, way more clever feeling for you, the player, than just finding a new tool in each dungeon and getting like a guided tour of how this tool works. So massive success there. But do the puzzles and the dungeons suffer from this? And I think the answer has to be yes, a little bit. Like I said, first of all, the dungeons themselves, there's only 4 of them, and they're smaller. The 4 that, like, the only other 3D Zelda game that had 4 dungeons was Majora's Mask, and those dungeons were long as fuck, and the last 3 are probably more complicated than any other dungeon in any other Zelda game. In terms of, like, overall complexity, in terms of, like, room-to-room complexity. There was only 4 of them, but that game takes me just as long as any other Zelda game. Those dungeons are monsters. And these dungeons are challenging for what they are, but what they are, like, I don't think that these dungeons are going to take anybody any longer than an hour. Probably 30 minutes for most people. And the fact that there's only 4 of them, despite that, is pretty sad. What is there what the argument that you've heard, no doubt, at this point, is, well, Tex, there's also shrines. And yeah, let's talk about shrines. The argument here is that the shrines are basically supposed to be mini dungeons. I think calling them mini dungeons is a little too generous. They are kind of like a single room from a dungeon. And the argument is that when you put all of these different rooms together, there's 120 shrines strewn around this map, and if you were to put all the shrines together as like a bunch of same-sized dungeons, you would have a comparable amount of dungeons to Ocarina of Time or Twilight Princess. That argument is a tough one to simply say is wrong, but I think they're wrong. I think they're wrong on a bunch of different levels. First of all, there's 120 shrines in this game. That's a big number of shrines, right? I think that you can safely take out at least a third of those, maybe half. It seems like so often these shrines are either a combat test of strength is what they call it. It's just the same mini boss, like wielding different weapons. It's not even like there's only 3 versions of him too, and the versions are just what weapon he has, or like sometimes the room is a little different, but it's always the same thing. Same music, same looking thing, same looking area. It's just the same stupid mini boss that I just got so disappointed after a while every time I had to fight him again because I wanted a puzzle and I got him instead. And then another big sizable, way too sizable chunk of the dungeons are you go into I call them dungeons, they're shrines. I go down into the shrine and you're always greeted by like the sleeping Sheikah guy that has been in stasis in the shrine that like dies instantly when you beat it at the end. Um, Sometimes he's just like, hey, "Fuck you, man. I'm too lazy. I didn't make a puzzle. Just fucking take my treasure." And he just that's it. He says, "By finding your way to the shrine, you have already proven your worth." And then you climb some stairs, get the spirit orb. I think that's what they are, and leave, and that's it. So if you remove those two, if you removed all of the combat shrines except for just okay, keep one of each of the combat trials. Keep the minor test of strength, the modest test of strength, and major test of strength. Um, keep just one of each of those and get rid of all of the shrines that are like there is no shrine. Take the treasure. And I think you have something more like 70 or 80 shrines, maybe. And that's being generous. And that's unacceptable. Um, it really makes the game feel, I don't know. It makes me feel, whenever it got to a point, after like the first 60 or 70 hours, it got to a point where every time I ended up at one of those shrines, I just felt ripped off by the game a little bit. Which is not a good feeling. It's not what I want. Um, and for some of the shrines that like you've already proven your worth is a fair argument. For some of them, not all of them. Some of them just didn't make any sense. There was this one where I basically just like I saw some platforms in the wall like going up, and I decided to bomb the things on top of the platforms and then climb the platforms, and then I found a shrine, and that it said by finding your way to the shrine, you've already proven your work. And I was like, what did I just do? I didn't do anything to get here. I just fucking found it like I did any other shrine. I just kind of like wandered around until I found it. Why are you saying I've already proven my worth? Give me a fucking puzzle. Most of them, there's some excuse, but I think most of them are just not satisfactory. A few of them are. Like, there's one where you fucking fight a dragon in the sky. Yeah, okay, I've proven my worth by getting here. There are these really cool labyrinths that I think I want to talk about. Or at least one of them is cool. The other two are kind of meh. That's probably justified, but a lot of the time it isn't, and most of the time it's questionable. So the argument that if you put all of the rooms together, I think you probably get as many puzzles as maybe like the Wind Waker, which had cut content. That game, like everyone knows, that game is missing like 2 dungeons that it should have had. So that's I think the more apt comparison because you can't put together those shrine rooms and immediately start counting them as extra dungeons. You have to first of all fill the space left over by the lack of content in the Divine Beast dungeons, the actual dungeons in the game. Then you're probably down to like 40 shrines, and then you can put those 40 shrines together and make maybe like 2 more dungeons, and then you can say that this game has kind of an amount of puzzles equal to 6 dungeons, maybe. And even then, I'm not. The other thing I'm unhappy with about these shrines is that they all look exactly the same. Like it's the same music, it's the same area. It's kind of cool at first. It's a cool area at first. It feels like the music is good. It's a good atmosphere. You're like underground in this like ancient technological relic, and it's kind of meant to test you, and it's cool. It kind of feels like the Temple of Time dungeon from Twilight Princess a little bit. But once that wears off, you realize, oh shit, this is it. I'm just going to be doing this for the whole game, and I want variety. Like there's a serious lack of variety to the content in this game, and no, there isn't. On one hand, there is. On the other hand, there isn't. On this hand, on the side of like the dungeon stuff, there's a lot of sameness involved, just a little bit. Like I said, I like the theme of the Divine Beasts. I like the dungeon. I like the idea that those are the dungeons, these giant crawling fucking machines that you have to go inside of. But like, just by virtue of that, you immediately know what the process is going to be for this entire game. What the process is going to be is you go to a corner of the map, you meet a race of people, um, and you meet some characters, and some stuff happens. Very little stuff usually, pretty much nothing. Um, and then there's going to be this unbelievably epic scene in which you try to board the thing, which does wear off because it's repeated 3 times in different ways. Um, and then you go inside the beast, and then you activate these 5 like terminals in the beast, and then you fight a boss that's the same, literally the same as all the other bosses, but slightly different. It's the same as the Divine Beast. It's like it's it's not even a boss either. It's like a version of the final boss. It's like Ganon in different like elemental forms, but he looks the same. Like the bosses are different in these Divine Beasts, but they're also like visually the same. And that's kind of the whole complaint I have here, is that this game, while everything is unique, it's all worth doing for its own merit. It feels very samey, especially compared to prior Zelda games, where each dungeon kind of felt like its own unique situation. Like you call them dungeons, but that's just a term almost. Like one of the dungeons in Skyward Sword is this abandoned pirate ship in the middle of like a sea of sand that you can like that has like a crystal at the top that you can reverse time in. Um, One of the dungeons in Ocarina of Time is this fucking princess of this fish people got swallowed by a huge whale that you have to go inside and save her. Like their dungeons are like situations that are excuses to get you into like a puzzle solving Metroidvania situation. Um, and it always felt they all felt different in other Zelda games. They felt more what's the word? They felt more spontaneous. That's what felt. They felt more spontaneous, and um, this game it feels like you're kind of going by the book. You know what you're in for, and you willingly go through that. And that's not what I want out of a Zelda game. That kind of takes away some of that feeling of wonderment that you get from playing a Zelda, which is why people like the Zelda series, and why the Zelda series is so beloved. And I'm getting really tired of talking, so um, that's a good place to stop. Next time, next video, next like installment of this. I don't even know when I'm going to be like putting all this together and putting it on YouTube. Next installment of this, I'm going to be talking about why the Zelda series is so beloved by people, and how this game tries to take advantage of that, and delivers the same feeling in a different way, and where they succeeded and where they failed. Because I think they failed in the respect that I was about to get into there, with the dungeons and the formula to kind of the game flow itself, the pacing. But they succeeded in the way they were going for. So it's a trade-off, and I'm very conflicted about the trade-off. But I'll talk about it next time. So yeah, till then, signing out. Okay, so before I get started talking about the things that I said I was going to be talking about in the second part of this, I'm going to take some time to talk about the art style and the music, just kind of like the surface level stuff, because I don't really see another place to put it. So first of all, I guess we'll talk about the game from a technical standpoint, which is the boring part. Uh, it's it's okay. It's actually kind of amazing that this is actually the first HD Zelda game, like the first Zelda game that was made for HD. Of course, we've got the Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD remakes, but this is actually the first real HD Zelda game that was made for HD. And so it's easy to look at this game with a higher degree of scrutiny than you're used to, because I think with the HD with the advent of HD, we've been seeing this kind of general trend, where people evaluate the graphics kind of away from the actual art style and more towards like a technical aspect, like can I see the polygons? How's the pop in? They're being much more critical of like how the game fares from a technical standpoint, and whether or not it like pushes that kind of side of things. But that's only half of it. That's not even half. That's not even half. That's like a fourth of it, honestly. So from a technical standpoint, is Breath of the Wild impressive? Not really. No. I mean, were you expecting it to be, or were you just expecting a new Zelda game that's finally like in the modern era of HD? And if that's what you're expecting, you get that, and it looks great. Um, Super Bunny Hop was hugely critical about the graphics in this game, but he didn't say anything about like the art style in his podcast. He was just talking about like I can see the polygons or um, just criticizing like texture details and the weather effects and stuff like that. And I think that's kind of missing the point of why you evaluate the graphics in a game in the first place. If you want The Witcher, go play The Witcher. I don't know. But at that said, there are some things that are worth thinking about. For instance, the pop-in is an important thing that can make or break this entire game. The pop-in is an important thing that can make or break this whole game. Because if you're on top of a cliff and you're looking out to try to like see stuff and get an idea of where to go, if the pop-in is so bad that like things that you would be supposed to see that would help you make decisions not being there, that would really suck. Um, am I going to claim that this Zelda game does not have any pop-in? Absolutely not. There is pop-in. I've seen plenty of times like enemies just kind of appear out of nowhere when I get close enough. Sometimes it's inconsistent with the way that it loads entities. But the important things that you would need to see to make decisions on where to go are always there. It's actually super impressive to some extent. When you get to the top of a mountain where you feel like you should be able to see everything of importance, you feel like you are seeing everything of importance. There's never going to be like a mountain that suddenly spawns out of nowhere. It's never anything like that. The bigger kind of things that you would need to see to make informed decisions on what you want to explore and where you want to go, there's no pop-in affecting that stuff. The only thing that the pop-in affects is like I said, just like mobs spawning or like game entities loading in that you wouldn't have seen anyway because they're usually like in a forest or something before, and the forest is the thing you decided to explore. It wasn't the thing you saw inside of the forest. It's always just going to be the forest. But the thing about this game is you really realize how like explorable and yet big this map is. You get to the top of a cliff on one corner of the map and you can see the important big things on the other corner of the map. Like you can see all the way across this map. And you might, in case you're wondering, like, what are the borders? The eastern side of this map is just ocean, so it's. I don't think they like stop you from sailing a certain distance. I think you'll eventually just run out of stamina and die. Actually, that can't be what happens because you could ride a boat. So they probably just say the same thing they say on the west side of the map, which is eventually it gets to a point where they say you cannot go any further, which is disappointing. I would have appreciated something more clever preventing the flare from like venturing more outward. I don't like that artificial like you have to stop kind of shit. I wish they had done something different there, but whatever. I'm talking about the graphics, not the map. So yeah, the pop-in the pop-in has been handled well. Is it an issue? Like from a technical standpoint, yes, it exists. It's not nearly as bad as like what I've seen of No Man's Sky or anything like that. But there is some pop-in shit, but it doesn't affect the gameplay. What you need to see when you're on top of a tower, looking out, is there. The next thing is like texture detail and aliasing and stuff like that. And the textures can be kind of dirty at times. I'm not going to deny it. But I don't know. That's all I'm going to say about it. That's all I can really think to say about it. The textures can look kind of muddy, but only if you're squinting at it. This is an HD game. It's meant to be played at least 720p, so, take that for what you will. And as far as, like, edges and, like, can you see the polygons? Yeah, I can. You can see the polygons. Like there are distinct edges on a cliff that look like they were made, that look like something that could only exist in a video game, where like you can tell that this mountain is not like a smooth mountain, but actually like a polygon. And to be honest, though, that actually helps climb the mountain. I think the game might actually be significantly more frustrating if it was harder to make those things out, because it's important to make decisions when you're climbing to see like when the surface gets more level, so you can potentially stop climbing and catch your breath. That's an important part of this game, and being able to see those edges, those polygonal edges, actually gives you um, an indicator. It lets you make informed decisions on like how to climb this mountain appropriately. And I don't know whether or not that's intentional. I don't. I would guess that it actually is, even though it sounds like something that wouldn't be, because I think the climbing in this game would be significantly more frustrating if you couldn't see that. And the things that are meant to be smooth look very smooth. So yeah, it's that's all I can really think to say about the technical side of the graphics in this game. From an artistic standpoint, the art style they've gone for is in the vein of like the Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. The Wind Waker kind of started this idea that you can use cell shading to kind of make the game look like a watercolor painting, like the way that they blur things in the distance and like smooth things out in the foreground to provide focus, like just a lot of stuff. I mean, I'm no artist. It's hard for me to describe these things, but everyone knows how good the Wind Waker looks, and Skyward Sword, for what it was, looked pretty good too. The blur was a little bad considering. I would love to see an HD remake of Skyward Sword. Honestly, I would want to see that remake more than the Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, because Twilight Princess just doesn't age well. I don't think there's any making that game look amazing. And Wind Waker, you can watch Matthew Matos's evaluation of the graphics in the Wind Waker, but they kind of botched it a little bit. And not only did they, it's not that they botched it, it's just like the Wind Waker didn't need to look any better. It looks great already. But Skyward Sword I think could really benefit from an HD remake, because that game went for like an impressionist art style. Basically, they attempted to strike a balance between the cartoonishness of the Wind Waker and the kind of quote unquote realistic version from Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. And I think they largely succeeded. That game does look good. A lot of people complain about a lot of things in that game, but nobody really complains about the graphics, and that's for good reason. The graphics and sound quality in Skyward Sword, just right. I like it. This game, I think, is better though. It does it's after the same kind of balance that Skyward Sword was after, that compromise between cartoony and realistic. And I think that this Zelda is exactly like what Skyward Sword wanted to be with its graphics. It's I looked up the inspiration, and you can look it up. There's hold on, I'm gonna find up. Yeah, I cannot pronounce this word, but apparently this game's art style was inspired by something called Gouache, Gauche. Is that gauche? I've heard the word gauche before. I don't know if this is gauche. I don't. Whatever. It is a type of watercolor painting. I think from what I understand, it's kind of watercolor painting, but with something added to it to make the textures seem less transparent and more opaque. So it kind of looks like a more filled in watercolor painting. It almost feels like a compromise between watercolor painting and actual painting, from what I'm reading here on this Wikipedia page. And I think I can see that in this game. If you're kind of like thinking about like, does this game look closer to the realism of Ocarina of Time or closer to Wind Waker? It definitely looks closer to Wind Waker than it does Ocarina of Time. Even closer to that than Skyward Sword looked. This game is definitely trying to be very connected to the Wind Waker. There's a lot of references to the Wind Waker. The Rito are an actual race in this game, just like in the Wind Waker. I don't think they've shown up since or like been talked about, but that they're kind of a race that was introduced in the Wind Waker, probably because they needed something to replace Gorons with, because Gorons didn't really have a place in a world filled with water where they would just sink. There was a Goron in that game. He was like a traitor or something. But the Rito were introduced in that game, and I always kind of liked the Rito. And they're in this game, and you go to their village, and the village theme is actually a remix of the Dragon Roost Island theme. So it does harken back to it. And this game feels like the Wind Waker in a lot of ways, in terms of art style. One particular failing of this game to imitate the Wind Waker is in Link's face. This is one of the most disappointing things to me about this game's art. This is the least expressive Link that we've gotten since Ocarina of Time. Like, if you remember Wind Waker, everyone knows Wind Waker. Everyone knows how like good Link's face looked in the Wind Waker. It was super simple, and you could always like he just did so many different interesting things with his face. His face always reflected what the player was feeling at the time or what the player wanted to feel on their adventure. And this Link in this game has the potential to have like interesting facial expressions. I would say, okay, it's not that this is the least expressive Link ever in a Zelda game. It's the fact that this is the least expressive Link in cutscenes. In the actual gameplay itself, um, Link is super expressive. He like his teeth are chattering if he's in the cold. He does all sorts of interesting things, and the way that he gets tired after climbing, everything Link does, he's got a lot of inflection and a lot of expressiveness when you're playing as him. But in the cutscenes themselves, they did this weird shit the same way they did it in Pokemon Sun and Moon. I don't know if you played Pokemon Sun and Moon, you probably got annoyed at one point at the fact that no matter what the fuck was going on, no matter how serious the situation or not serious the situation was, in the cutscenes of this game, your character would just always have the same dopey ass fucking stupid smile on his face, like he didn't give a shit what was going on at all. And it took me right out of the experience in that game, and it takes me right out of the experience in this game too. Link doesn't have a dumb smile on his face all the time. In fact, instead he has this kind of like determined blank look on his face. It's you could tell that they were trying to go for this one face that would apply to the most possible situations in a game where you're on this heroic adventure. And he has that all the time. He has two types of faces in cutscenes, which is every now and then he gets surprised, and that's rare. And then other than that, he just has this blank fucking expression on his face that just makes it seem like he doesn't give a shit. It's such a step back from the past three Zelda games that I just don't understand why they went that route. I don't like it, and it's pretty disappointing. This is not. It's a good looking Link. It's a good design for the new Link. I don't even care that the green tunic isn't in this game. But that face, he just doesn't do enough. Like I get that Link is supposed to be a blank slate for the player, you know. It's something that he's a character that the player fills in as um, playing the game. And honestly, I feel like they missed two big opportunities here, which is one with his face and two, um, if the player wants to pretend that they are Link playing this game, there should be an option to play as a girl. You have the design already. Linkle is there. Why can't you be a girl? There's literally no reason why. Okay, well there is a romance with a girl character, that's implied, but honestly, in this day and age, you could just keep it. Like it's fine. I don't see a reason why they shouldn't have given you that option to play as a girl, because why can't Link be a girl? I'm not. This is not me being a feminist or anything. I just don't see the point. If you're having a character that the player is supposed to feel like they're playing as, and the person is a girl that's playing the game, why should she have to play as a boy? I don't see it. Anyway, but either way, Link's face is not expressive. I'm going on and on about this. Maybe I should slow down and stop and go to something else. Um, the Gorons are. I didn't know. I don't remember Gorons being cute in past Zelda games, but the Gorons in this game are absolutely fucking adorable. I want to hug all of them. They look so funny and fun, and just I love the Gorons in this game. Um, there's I don't know. These are the best looking Gorons in the Zelda game. Period. They did such a good job with the Gorons, and I don't know. I feel like there's maybe some people that are gonna get pissed off by some stuff about the Gorons. The Gorons are like wearing hard hats in this game, which doesn't make any sense really. They're made of rocks, right? Shouldn't they like not have to worry very much about like head protection? Maybe they haven't said much. I still haven't finished doing all the Goron stuff in this game, but like they're all wearing hard hats when they're mining and stuff, and I'm just like, I don't know about this. It's cute. It looks funny, and I don't mind it, but I feel like some people are gonna get annoyed by that. Um, by the way, if you haven't, speaking of expressiveness, everyone besides Link is unbelievably good at like expressing the resemblance. The expressions for all the other supporting characters in this game are top notch. And if you haven't seen what the surprised look on a Goron's face is, you owe it to yourself. Just get near a Goron, take out your sword, and swing it near him. Don't swing it at him, because then he'll get like offended. But if you swing it like near him, he'll do this like jumping back thing, and his face is Oh my god, it's so funny. It's so cute. The Gorons in this game look amazing. The Zoras in this game look pretty good. All the races have like all the races have like it's more than just one age group. All the age groups are accounted for. You've got old Gorons, you've got young Gorons, you've got kid Gorons. The kid Gorons are adorable. You've got old Zoras, you've got young Zoras. What's his name? What's the Zora Prince? That fucking pose that he strikes is awesome. I love that guy. Sidon. He's great. The Zora King is also pretty cool looking. Uh, the Gerudo are kind of tried to like be featured as one of the principal races in the Zelda games, uh, which is weird because I kind of thought the Gerudo were like regular elves, but I don't know. Like even still, they are a weird culture. I can see it where they're kind of like a different culture that you have to explore. They definitely cleaned up the lore behind them a lot. It's not quite as like incestuous and silly and not thought out as it was in Ocarina of Time. Now basically, you still can't get into their city if you're a man, but they leave the city on pilgrimages to kind of like find a husband and have kids and then bring the kids back into town. I don't know what they would do with the kids though if the kids were born males. Would they be allowed in their town? I don't really think that. I still think they didn't quite completely think about the ramifications of a town full of nothing but women, but they tried a little harder than they did before. The problem with the Gerudo in this game is that they just look fuck ugly. Like I do not see what they were going for with the Gerudo. It's like they looked at the polygonal like messes that were the Gerudo from Ocarina of Time and said, yeah, let's just make this in HD, and it looks about as good as you would expect. It's weird because the regular elves, the regular human elves, I'm just gonna call them humans because they're just humans with long ears in the Zelda games. They're humans, whatever. The regular humans are all into the Gerudo. Like they're super like the allure of like women desperate to seek husbands and leave their cities to seek husbands. Like there's tons of like innuendo with people talking about like, oh man, this Gerudo girl and shit like that. But it comes off as strange because all of the Gerudo are so visibly different than them and not attractive in the conventional sense whatsoever. The way that their hips cave in is just weird. They barely look human. They honestly barely look human. And when I say human, I mean elvish. They look like they should be a different race. It's like Nintendo couldn't decide one way or the other. Are they a different race, or are they humans that have tans? Um, and yeah, they just look weird. I don't really. Their leader looks cute. Um, she's got a good character model, but she's the only one. She's the only like interesting, cool-looking Gerudo in the whole game, which is probably a missed opportunity. The Rito look much better. I'm not gonna defend what the Rito looked like in Wind Waker. They were like bird people with stupid, silly noses, and I don't think they even really have weird noses in this game. They look like birds mostly. They look much better in this game than they did before. There's one character that's like, his name is Cass, and he just kind of shows he's always like around. Every time you like go somewhere or go to like a new place, you'll eventually run into him playing his accordion, and he'll sing you a song. He's a great character. Everyone's gonna love Cass. I think he's gonna like be remembered as like the best supporting character in this game. And he's a Rito. Um, so yeah, art style overall pretty good. I just think that Link's expressions are dumb, in that they don't exist in cutscenes. Like I said, in the game itself, when you're playing as Link, he has plenty of expressiveness. But in the cutscenes, he just has this blank look like he doesn't give a shit, which is not good because the game attempts to have a lot of character development with him and with Zelda specifically. You have these memories that you're encountering where you're kind of witnessing this growing relationship out of chronological order, of course, but um, you kind of watch this relationship grow between Link and Zelda, and I don't know. I guess Zelda has a thing. I guess she has a thing for talking to brick walls because that's the only way you can get to know Link. Like his face is a brick fucking wall to talk to him. Um, anyway, that's all I'll say about the art style. It's good. I think that it's not going to offend anyone, and I don't think it's going to go down as like something like special either. It's a good art style that they could stick with for a long time. That I don't think anyone would mind. The music in this game. Hmm. Well, what there is good, but and when I look at the track list, it seems like there's as many musical tracks in this game as there are in other Zelda games. But the tracks in this game are, for the most part, mostly like very minimalist, almost ambient sound effects. Like they took a note from Dark Souls, and made it so that there is no music in general playing when you are just out exploring, which is what you're going to be doing 90 to 95% of the time in this game. So prepare for silence the majority of the time you're playing this game, which is something that is really I'm very, very conflicted about this. Like, whether or not that should be okay in a Zelda game, because I think of music when I think of Zelda. Like, there's always music plays such an important part in this game. If you think back to it, like, not only is the music always phenomenal, and not only do the Zelda games take better advantage of like dynamic soundtracks, like soundtracks that change as you do stuff than any other game, but like, I mean, even music plays a big part in the games themselves. Some of the highlights of the Zelda games are like musical bits. Like, remember Skyward Sword? Remember those like awesome like ballad things that happened at the second half of the game with Fi every time you were like going to a new place, or like the ocarina, or the fucking the Wind Waker. You're a conductor. You're conducting the wind like it's a symphony. Like, there's music plays such an important part in all of these games. So for Zelda to take a cue from Dark Souls in that way and make their game silent, I'm not convinced is the right move. I like it though. I don't it's hard. It's hard to say. What my main problem with the music in this game is probably is the fact that it doesn't really seem like there's any kind of theme to it. It doesn't seem like it's its own game with its music. The musical tracks that are there, which are mostly boss themes, all seem like they're out of a different Zelda game. It almost feels like they got the people that did the music for each Zelda game to do one track for this game, and then they just kind of dropped them all in this game. Like the boss musics in general, the regular. Okay, so spoiler warning. I'm gonna talk about the bosses now. I'm sure a lot of people like have been hearing me talk, and I've spoiled all sorts of shit already. But one thing that I think a lot of people don't like spoiled is the bosses. So I'll put a timestamp to skip this if you don't want me to talk about the bosses. Um, but the boss themes. So you've got basically the four versions of Ganon, or the Ganon fight before Ganon. The bosses of the Divine Beasts all seem like they were ripped straight out of Ocarina of Time. It seems like they kind of looked at the boss theme from Ocarina of Time, because they didn't have unique boss themes in Ocarina of Time, and kind of emulated that style for those boss themes. There's different variations of them for each um, dungeon, for each Divine Beast, but it's the same overall theme, and I'm not a fan of it. I never really liked the boss music from Ocarina of Time, and I'm not sure many people did. So not a big fan of those. Nothing really dynamic happens either. Actually, maybe it does. I can't remember. My biggest problem with the bosses themselves. This is kind of out of off the topic, but the bosses themselves. The game doesn't have a companion character, which might be the biggest departure from typical Zelda that there is in this game. Um, but when you're in the Divine Beasts, you're being talked to by like the pilot that got killed, but before when Ganon hacked the fucking Divine Beasts or whatever, and they like cheer you on in the boss fights and like tell you how to fight the boss as you're fighting the boss, and I just felt like I was being babied, and I really hate that. I really hate the way that the people talk to you when you're fighting the bosses. It doesn't ruin it, but it definitely was not welcome. I don't know why they thought that was okay. Um, I guess it's okay to have them be talking to you in each dungeon. I didn't really appreciate that much either, because the dungeons aren't that complicated that you needed that to happen. But whatever. I don't know. I don't really like the way that the pilots had. Um, I don't really like the pilots talking to you in the dungeons. Period. I don't mind them talking to you, talk about their abilities. I don't mind the flashbacks involving them. I like them as characters mostly. They're super one-dimensional, but they're all right. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, I was talking about the boss themes. So there's that boss theme, which feels like it was straight out of Ocarina of Time. Then you've got like there's like three main overworld bosses. Kind of actually, let's scratch that. There's pretty much five like bosses that you can randomly encounter in the wild, and you'll encounter multiples of all of them. There's the Hinox, which is like this. He's kind of like the boss Bokoblin. Like you've got this hierarchy of like minions. You've got the Bokoblins, which are the like slowest tiers. Then you got the Moblins. Well, actually, no. Then you got the Lizalfos. Then you've got the Moblins, and then at the top of the food chain, you've got the Hinox, which is this giant fucking fat ass, one-eyed, creepy-looking thing. He's a great design. All the bosses are great designs, except for the bosses of the Divine Beast for some reason. Um, and he is his theme is great. His theme is like super perfect. It's like kind of comedic and kind of like slow paced because he's like a slow moving guy, and it feels kind of tribal at the same time. It touches on everything that kind of it really characterizes the Hinox as like a character. It's great. Um, so the Hinox fight, and I'm trying to think of like a Zelda. I don't really think that. I think if anything, the Hinox fight and the Stone Talus fight, which I'll talk about in a minute, they kind of feel like boss themes from the Wind Waker. Um, Actually, yeah, I would say that the Hinox and the Stone Talus and the Molduga. I'm gonna say Mulgara by accident. I'm just gonna say Mulgara, period, because it's Mulgara, whatever. Um, well, it's not. Whatever. I would say that those themes are primarily inspired by boss themes from the Wind Waker. There's a lot of boss themes in the Wind Waker, but I think all three of them kind of feel similar. Um, the problem with I think all the boss themes actually is like there's this weird glitch where they kind of tend to stop playing in the middle of the fight, and like it's really annoying, especially the Guardian theme. I kept the Guardian theme. I After a while, I just could not get that theme to consistently play. It just seemed like every time I fought a Guardian, it would turn on and off. I don't know if anyone else got that problem. You should get back to me. I think it has something to do with the stun locking of them. Like they de-aggro from you when they get stunned, and then they have to re-aggro onto you. And if they don't do that fast enough, then the music starts playing. Then the music stops playing. But I don't know. It's weird that the music stops like that. Then you've got the Stone Talus, which is this rock monster that randomly shows up. The rock monster, his theme is great. Also, it seems kind of like something you might get out of the Wind Waker, to some extent. Um, Also, very much characterizes a rock monster, although there's not as much to say about a rock monster. It's a monster made of rocks. You get a bunch of minerals when you kill him. Get to climb on top of him, Shadow of the Colossus style. It's a pretty cool fight. I don't think it's nearly as cool as the Hinox, to be honest. Not to mention that the Hinox is used in more interesting ways. I guess while I'm on the subject, like the Hinox and the Stone Talus, like there's a bunch of different versions of the both of them, and the Stone Talus doesn't get used that often. You see different versions of him. There's some ice version of him. There's a fire version of him. Um, and those versions you have to kind of like cool them off or heat or warm them up in order to like climb them using like fire of some sort or ice, and it's cool. Um, the Hinox, you shoot him in the eye, and then just hit him a bunch of times. The Hinox is kind of cool though because he has a lot of different behaviors. All the enemies in this game have a crap ton of behaviors. I do not want to. I want to take this one step at a time. I'll talk about the enemy behaviors later. But the Hinox is pretty cool. Like if there's a tree nearby, he'll just fucking grab the tree and start using the tree as a weapon. But then he has a completely different set of like attacks when he has a tree than when he's like normally there. So there's a lot of different stuff to like dealing with the Hinox. A lot of people are going to say that the Hinox fight is too easy because you can just repeatedly shoot him in the eye and then hit him a bunch of times. And yes, that's kind of true, but the Nintendo at least made an attempt. You have to acknowledge that Nintendo attempted to prevent this from happening because the Hinox will actually like if he sees that you're aiming at his eye, he'll actually cover his eye with his hand and like approach you. And you can still hit it because he's got like his fingers kind of like opened up to see you just a little bit. But it makes it much harder to hit him in the eye. You have to kind of wait for your opening in that way. So that's kind of neat. Um, so that's the Hinox. That's the Stone Talus. Stone Talus kind of feels like it's out of the Wind Waker. Hinox feels pretty unique. Um, then you've got Molduga, which is this fucking awesome, probably the best boss of all of them. It's too bad they ruined it. Molduga is a sand monster that is basically Mulgera. Like he's not Mulgera. People are gonna argue about this. Mulgera is definitely the Mulgera looks different. I'm not sure you actually even ever get. No, yeah, Mulgera does come out of the ground. Mulgera and Molduga are basically the same thing, and the boss themes are basically the same. Although, like everyone loves the Mulgera's theme from Wind Waker. I think that's kind of like the that's like the big beloved theme of that game is Mulgera's boss theme, and they managed to like do it better in this game. I am convinced. The Mulgera's theme in this game, the soundtrack kind of abruptly changes when you like find his weak point, and that doesn't feel natural. It feels very like an abrupt track. It seems like you kind of pressed the next track button. It doesn't feel natural, but the theme is fantastic in both cases. Mulgera is definitely the most similar to like a regular Zelda boss of the three. You have to figure out how to like expose him and then run up to him and use your sword and then hit him a bunch of times with your sword and then he does something else and you have to kind of like avoid him and then you kind of do repeat this whole process. Basically, it's basically like the it's the typical boss where you get him to swallow a bomb and then detonate the bomb. It's one of those bosses. He like responds to vibrations in the ground and tries to like eat you from the ground. But if you make the bomb vibrate in front of yourself, he'll eat the bomb and then you blow up the bomb inside of him, and that would be cool. But Nintendo, I don't know what they were thinking with this. They kind of fucked it up because it's you don't actually have to get him to swallow the bomb. Like he falls over in the same way. Just getting hit by a bomb arrow or just having a bomb go off like near him and it completely trivializes the whole fight once you realize that, and it's really disappointing. Like that's not that hard. It's not a difficult fight once you realize he needs to eat the bomb. So I'm not really sure why Nintendo elected to make the fight so easy in that regard. It seems really silly to me that you could just throw a bomb at him and get him to fall over. Um, After he falls over and you hit him a bunch of times, he like goes into this enraged mode, which you can completely negate by just climbing on a stone. Uh, but if you don't realize that, which I didn't at first, I had to come up with this whole plan to fight him, where I like rented a sand seal, which are these adorable fucking they're exactly what they sound like. You fucking get on a shield and surf on the sand with the sand seal pulling you. Because the sand seal goes super fast, so I had to like get on a sand seal and like just book it to like outrun the Molduga like in that phase of the fight, which made the fight seem really epic. But then I realized you don't have to do that at all, and it was pretty disappointing. But that's kind of the moral of all these bosses, by the way. All these overworld bosses that you fight multiple times are super epic the first couple of times you fight them because you're gradually figuring out how to do all of this stuff, which is why I hope that people did take my spoiler warning like in stride for a bit. Um, Gradually learning how to fight these bosses totally feeds back into that theme that I was mentioning before about like mastering the elements, mastering the world that you're in. Um, because you just gradually learn how to fight them and you find these weak points. But the first couple of times you fight them, you are like going blind. It's pretty fun. They're very fun bosses at first, but if you're seeing people on the internet claiming these bosses are too easy, they're yeah, of course any boss is going to be easy after you fight it like four times. That would be true of any Zelda game in which you could fight the bosses more than once. It would get boring. Thankfully, they try to mix it up. Molduga is just Molduga. He exists in like four different places, and there's not much to say about it. The Hinox is used in some nice ways. Like, there's this one part where like you're in this there's this one part where they put you in pitch darkness and try to like basically have you navigate this maze in pitch black darkness, and it took me forever to find my way through this maze. And eventually, like I found something that seemed like the end of the maze. It was this like hole, this hole that was very obviously I'm supposed to put like this ball in a hole. There's puzzles like this, like specifically all over the place. And so I turned around and I saw the ball and I was like, okay, there, I finished the fucking dungeon finally. It wasn't a dungeon, it was just like a little hidden thing. It wasn't even hidden. Anyway, so I found the ball and I try to grab it, but I'm running into something and I don't really know what I'm running into. Or do I even run into it? Basically, the ball you can't see at the time, you can't tell at the time, but it is on a Hinox, like it is attached to him by with a necklace. And you can't tell. You can't tell in the darkness, and you randomly have to fight a Hinox in pitch darkness. It is terrifying. You cannot see anything. You can't see yourself. All you can see is his eye, which if you if you know how to fight him is all you need to see. And if you haven't fought him before, or if you've died to him before but haven't figured it out, like maybe that's gonna be the way to teach you, like hit him in the eye. But yeah, I mean the bosses are used in interesting ways. They're not just kind of like scattered for you to fight for loot. They're always used in some, well, not always, but a lot of the time, especially the Hinox, is used in ways, in creative ways, to make the fight interesting each time. Um, Moldoga, not so much. Um, and then the two bosses that I count as bosses, even though they don't have boss meters, are the Lynels and the Guardians. Now the Guardians are a topic unto themselves. They are the like most terrifying presence in this game. They're the thing in this game that are just around that you have to be scared of and have to be on edge because of. Um, and their theme is very much a you fucked up run theme. Like the first few seconds of it seemed like this fucking it seems like it seems like a guy playing the piano just like has a heart attack, and then the piano music is replaced with like this very synthy kind of stuff. It kind of feels like um, Twilight Princess's Twilight stuff, like that kind of music, the very like industrial kind of music. And it's good. It's really good. It's really good. You fucked up run music, and it turns into real boss music if you decide to actually fight them, which will happen eventually. But for a good portion of the game, I'm sure everyone is just going to run from these things. Um, I'll talk more about the Guardians in a little bit because that they deserve some time. Uh, and then Lionels are, I don't think they get their own boss theme. I think that's just regular enemy music. But Lionels are definitely bosses. They're definitely consistently harder than any boss, no matter how many times you fight them, because they are a raw sword fight. Like the Lionels are warriors. They're bigger than you, but not by a whole lot, and they have different weapons. Like all the Lionels that you find, not all of them, but they have like five different types of Lionels with different weapons. Um, and the weapons really affect the nature of the fight. You have to like learn a different attack pattern for each one. They have some similarities across the different Lionels, but um, like there's one with a mace, there's one with like a spear, there's one with a regular sword, and it's a different fight every time because of that. And they're great fights. I think they do get a different like battle theme, but I think that the battle theme occurs elsewhere. That battle theme is it's kind of playful. It kind of feels like the Wind Waker to some extent, but epic at the same time. Uh, and that's pretty much all the boss themes. I haven't heard the final boss theme, obviously. Um, and then other music. So like in general, the game is silence. But then depending on what's happening, there can be music. For instance, there's some music that kind of feels like sacred when there's dragons nearby that are flying around. There's these Chinese dragons that kind of patrol. The villages have themes, and all of the themes just feel like those themes. The Zora Domain theme sounds like the Zora Domain theme from Ocarina of Time. The Rito theme is the theme from the Rito Village from the Wind Waker, literally, except it's slower and more like understated because that's just, I guess that is the theme of the music in this game aside from the boss themes, is that it's a very understated soundtrack. Even the dungeon themes are very understated. I was really disappointed at first when I first went to the first dungeon. The first dungeon I did was the water dungeon, the elephant, and I was like, "Where's the music? There's nothing happening." But there is something cool about the divine beasts, which is that basically the process of activating these divine beasts is like finding five um, uh, kind of like buttons to press all over the beast, and every time you press a button and get one step towards kind of reactivating this thing, there's something gets added on top of the music track. And so by the time you've like fully pressed activated the thing and pressed all the buttons, you're hearing the full dungeon theme. And the full dungeon theme is always pretty good. And it's a cool feeling to like gradually make all this music happen. And it's a good feeling of progress. It's a good use of dynamic soundtracks in a video game. Nintendo is so good at dynamic soundtracks. Game Maker's Toolkit has a cool video on that. So, uh, village themes, boss themes, dungeon themes. I guess the only theme that's really missing is an overworld theme. But the overworld is the world of this game. It's the meat of this game. So to not have that music at all, like there is some musical accompaniment. There is some musical accompaniment. Like there's this weird like ominous two piano notes that play at random points of the night, and I'm still not sure why it ever happens. But I wish I knew why because I really don't get why that. I'm like, piano guy, what's up? Why are you doing this? What is there something to be scared of? Is something happening here? Usually it's nothing, but that there's these two piano notes that happen now and then, and that's really the fact that I'm like mentioning this, the fact that I'm mentioning every now and then a guy presses two notes on a piano as like a highlight of the soundtrack to this game. I think that speaks volumes about the minimalist kind of approach to the music in this game. Which, if you like that kind of style, you might love the music in this game. But I personally feel like that's for a different series than Zelda. Zelda is about music to a larger degree than that. I understand that if you, no matter what overworld theme you give the overworld, it will get stale eventually. So maybe not have music all the time in the overworld, but something. I'm not really sure what. I really don't know what they could have done instead. Because I agree that just having one track going on all the time, that's not what I'm asking for here. Don't get me wrong. I'm not asking for that. But I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure about the music in this game. But the stuff that's there is good. And hey guys, Tex from the future here. I'm here because I just listened to myself talk about the music in this game for a while, and I feel the need to say something that I never actually say, but I hope is kind of clear to you guys, which is that this video, this audio diary that I'm making, is kind of just, it was an attempt for me to make my opinions vocal and kind of like form opinions about this game. It wasn't necessarily me stating opinions. And most of my opinions now on the Zelda games are a result of me thinking the things that I did in this video, but a lot of them aren't the same anymore. I actually have a much higher opinion on the music now than I did when I was making this video. Um, so, I mean, just don't take any of the opinions I say in this video too seriously. It was more an attempt to try to lay them out than anything else. So that's the bosses and the music, and graphics. Let's talk about why we play Zelda games. In short, the reason Zelda games are so special is because of that feeling of wonderment that they instill. That feeling that you're going on a magical kind of whimsical magic adventure. Even if the adventure is dark, it's still kind of whimsical and magical, no matter what. Um, but it's for that feeling of wonderment that you get from being in this kind of world where you're constantly being surprised by like crazy creative things happening. You know what it kind of feels like? It kind of feels like Alice in Wonderland. Like it feels like you're kind of Alice in Wonderland, except that you're a hero that's meant to like save Wonderland or something. It's like it's that same kind of, oh shit. It's a village of people. It's a bunch of fucking people that are cards, or it's a talking it's a talking rabbit that fucking speaks in riddles. I'm kind of giving away how little I actually remember of Alice in Wonderland right now, but I think that I'm onto something with this, and I mean, case in point, Alice American McGee's Alice. If you haven't played the recent remake of that game, like the 2012 reboot of the American McGee's Alice, it is a Zelda game. It's a Zelda-like kind of experience, and it's great. Um, and I think that they looked to the Zelda series to make an in Wonderland game because of what I'm saying. It's that the Zelda games kind of capture that feeling of wonderment that you get from being on this adventure that other games just don't provide. So in the last five Zelda games, that feeling of wonderment mostly came from the events that were taking place in the story. Like you would sail on a ship to an island forest, and there would be like a bunch of like weird like plant people wearing masks that would float around, and then they give you a magical like leaf that you can use to fly through the air when you get sucked into these like bulbous plant things that spit you back out, and you have to go into this crazy cave to save one of them, and then they play you a fucking song. Um, they have this like song that they play for you in thanks, and then they give you a magic orb that you need, and then you go and like activate these like ancient relics in three different places, or you're putting on masks that change you into things, or there's a feeling of like true magical wonderment in this game. And it's not like Harry Potter. It's not like you're being a magician. It's you're just in this world full of magical stuff, and you're like learning how to work inside of it. You're like getting power over it gradually. That's true of all the Zelda games. That's why the tools feel so good in these games. Because you're not the person, you're not the magic man. The magic man is everyone else. You're just fucking the hero. You're not fucking the hero. You are the hero. You get magical tools that help you gain power over this magical world, and getting power over like a magic world, a world full of crazy stuff that doesn't exist in real life, feels better than like regular power fantasy games, like let's say Infamous. It's a different kind of like empowerment than that. It's a more whimsical, magical feeling of empowerment than that. I'm going on and on about this, but this is important. This really is, I think, why Zelda games are so beloved. Because your first Zelda game as a kid is a truly magical experience that you just don't get anywhere else. Like everyone's got a different favorite Zelda game, and that's largely dependent on whatever their first Zelda game is. Like to more of an extent than any other series. Like for me, I mean, my first Zelda game that I like got into was actually Oracle of Seasons, but that was a handheld game. I guess I'm talking about the 3D games right now. The first Zelda game that I really like felt something special with was the Wind Waker. Then I went back and got that out of Majora's Mask. I never quite got that out of Ocarina. Um, so the Zelda games have always been about instilling this sense of wonderment. That's why they're so and adventure. That's why they're so like beloved by people. And this Zelda game, for some reason, I don't really know why, but they decided to kind of reevaluate how to provide that sense of wonderment and adventure. And they tried to accomplish it in a fundamentally different way than they usually do. The last 5 games, they've tried to do it through events and things happening. They try to keep that, but then they try to amplify it in this game by providing that sense of wonderment the way that the original Zelda did. And I just watched a really interesting video by Game Maker's Toolkit talking about the new Zelda game that explains exactly what I'm about to say. I might not even say it because his video is right there. That sense of adventure you get from just being in a crazy world that's dangerous, that's not going to tell you anything, and that has hidden secrets everywhere. That's where this game's sense of wonderment comes from. That's what they try to do that's new in this game, and probably new in video games in general. And they mostly accomplished that. They mostly did accomplish that. Question is that what everyone's looking for? Is everyone that wants a new Zelda game going to feel satisfied by having this sense of wonderment instilled in a different way? And I'm on the fence. I really am. But, I mean, there is a sense of wonderment to this open world that is going to be studied by people for years to come. There's a few... So I think the only way to really explain what I'm talking about is to like tell a few stories about things that happened to me while playing this game. Because that's really what this game is all about. It's about the adventures. It's about the individual episodes of like, I saw this, I went here, and then some shit happened. So like, here's one story. At the edge of the map on the east side, on the east side, I noticed like this crazy thing across the like ocean at the edge of the map. There's this it looked like a big fucking labyrinth. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy. What is that? So I jump off the cliff and I paraglide over there, and I get about halfway there and I notice there are like these guardians, these like floating guardians that like scan you, that scan for people. like patrolling all over this place, and I've paraglided way too far to like back off to like get to like change my mind and go back. I notice they that's like pop in done right. That right there is pop in done completely correctly, because when I noticed those things, I got this feeling like, oh shit, I just came to the wrong neighborhood. And so, but I can't stop. I'm already paragliding there, so I paraglide in, and those guardians that float around and scan for you are way above you. Like they don't notice you where they are. You rock into this labyrinth, and some random voice tells you find the shrine, and you'll get a reward. And I'm just like, okay, adventure time. You know that's what it is. It's like I found an adventure. It was just waiting there for me. Um, and the labyrinth itself was really cool. Although it could have been better if they actually took advantage of the Wii U gamepad, but they don't. If I could, because I think the idea behind these labyrinths was that you were supposed to be constantly looking down at your gamepad because the map would be there. Because the map of the labyrinth kind of it becomes a puzzle that's like more typical of like a pen and paper puzzle where it's like I've got to find the path that gets me here. But because I can't look down at my map, I have to constantly open up the map and then try to memorize like a few different turns that I had to make, and that felt kind of wonky. But nonetheless, I made every possible wrong turn by and literally by accident. Like this labyrinth is kind of brutal. Like you make a left, um, and you make a left and you end up getting nowhere and you have to completely turn around and it takes like a full 3 minutes to like get back to the entrance and like try a different direction and I tried all the wrong directions and that's the thing that's the hilarious thing about this labyrinth and this adventure is that they're all the wrong way to go. But the game kind of implies that you're not supposed to climb. I think most players are going to be afraid to climb up because if you climb to the top, they've got those fucking guardians patrolling up there that are meant to shoot you back down. That's why they're patrolling. It's to make sure that you can't like cheat by climbing up to the top and like looking down to try to find like the exit in the cheap way by just hopping over like everything. Because they've got those guardians patrolling. But like it turns out that's what you're supposed to do. Eventually, you're supposed to say fuck this game. I'm not playing your game anymore. I'm taking this into my own hands. I'm gonna climb to the top. I'm just gonna fucking run from these guardians or fight them, and then try to cheat my way through it. And that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to eventually get fed up, climb to the top, deal with those guardians in some way, and then notice that there's like a drop that doesn't connect to anything else. You can just drop to the exit. And it's this whole fucking episode that plays in your head. The shrine itself, this is why I say sometimes it's excusable for the shrines to not actually have their own content, because this content is enough. Like, it is appropriate to say by finding the shrine you've already passed the trial, because that was definitely a trial. Like, and it was more fun than a normal trial. Like going through that whole process of like realizing you have to cheat and then like cheating and like feeling like the game doesn't want you to cheat, but it actually does want you to cheat. It's just awesome. And this is just there. This is an open world game where this thing is just around. It's not a blip on your map. It's not like here's like you fill in the tower. You go to the top of the towers and like you get the map to fill in. And the map in this game is super barren. It's a real map. That's all it is. I'm kind of surprised it even shows you where you are on it because it doesn't give you any dots to show you where to go. If you have a quest like even the quests like you can turn quests on and it will show blips on the map but unless it's like the main quests that tells you where to generally go to like start up like the 4 Divine Beast quests, aside from that, like if you get a side quest and you turn the quest on, the dot on the map won't point to where to go. It'll just point to the guy that gave you the quest. You have to like interpret the clues and figure out where to go yourself and like observe the world and observe your surroundings and make markings on your map. There's a really not intricate, but there's a decently complex system where you can label stuff on your map and make your own waypoints and just kind of make your own system for marking important things on the map. And you're expected to do that on your own. You're expected to climb cliffs, look around, find things of interest, and explore. And it's a ballsy decision to do that because, like I said, most open world games up until now have been more about decorating. But if you're gunning for this type of game where you are promising adventure at every turn, which is literally what they're doing in this game, that's a tall order for a game. Um, and like I said, I've already said some stuff about in I think they completely succeeded at that. Um, at making an open world that is filled with adventure at every turn. And it's unique adventure. It's always a different thing that happens. I mean, there's more than one labyrinth, but like it's cool. It's just filled with cool stuff. And the concessions that were made were not towards the like there were no concessions made towards this goal of like making a world that instills a sense of wonderment to explore. In fact, there are surprisingly many concessions from the old formula to allow for this. That's what they did. Um, so one of them, they made two central concessions to make this possible in a Zelda game. The first concession is something everyone's going to appreciate, which is that they decided to finally not care about killing you. This game will kill the fuck out of you over and over and over again, at least in the beginning. It gets a little too easy as they continue to supply you with stuff later on, but in the first like 40 hours or so, the world truly feels like something that you do not have control over. Remember, the theme of this game is like taking control of what's yours, taking humanity, getting back its feeling of power over the world around it. And you feel that too as you play, especially with the Guardians. That's why I was going to save the Guardians for now. So the Guardians are these like um they're the remnants of like the army, the mechanical army that was going to attack Ganon. And you can tell like the visual storytelling for this is great because there's scattered everywhere on this map are just like completely like destroyed scattered everywhere on this map are just like guardians that are just dead on the ground, just like husks of machines that have been like blown up in the wars. Um, and most of them are dead, and you can even loot them for like gears and stuff. But some of them are not dead. Some of them have just been like had their legs blown off, but they'll aim at you, and the ones that are not dead are they want to kill you, um, because they've been hacked by Ganon. Remember, so the ones that are alive are still programmed to kill you, and a lot of them ones that are alive like are still damaged. Like they still have like their legs blown off and they're stuck on the ground, but they can still target you, and they'll kill you in one hit for the most part until like a good while into the game. Um, and they have good aim, and they can aim at you from far, far away once they activate. And they have this interesting behavior. They have a lot of like, I think there's a lot of RNG in their behavior patterns because whenever I think like, oh man, a lot of the time I would like stuff would happen. Like I would get close enough to a guardian that I'd be like, okay, this thing isn't turning on. It's obviously not alive. And then I like start to look away and oh shit, it's alive. Like there's a lot of that happening. There's a lot of like, oh, there's one that's crawling around. I'm probably far away enough that it won't notice me though. And then it notices you. I feel like there's a lot of like randomness to their aggro range and their like activation range that make for a lot of like tense situations where suddenly you have a guardian on your ass and you weren't intending for it. Um, and I don't know how I'm such a fucking idiot. If like okay, again, seriously, fucking spoiler warning. Like this is one of the best parts of the game. If you haven't played the game, if you haven't had experience like fighting the guardians yet, don't listen to this. But like I'm a fucking idiot because I didn't understand. I don't know why I didn't realize I could just shoot them in the eye to like interrupt them. I don't know why I didn't think to do that. But if you do shoot them in the eye with an arrow, then you interrupt their targeting and stun them a little bit, and you can run up and hit them a few times. They have a shitload of health, and most of the basic weapons won't do anything really to them, but you can at least like deal with them, deal with the immobile ones by shooting them in the eye with an arrow. Or it's not really an eye; it's a targeting reticle. Then there are ones that move. The ones that move have these like these like five or six like tentacle legs that it uses to crawl around the map, and they crawl fast as shit, and they are scouring for you. Um, and these are the really scary ones. These are basically bosses. They don't have boss meters, like I said, but that's just because there's so many of them, and because like they there is often more than one at a time. So, but they're definitely bosses. Like they definitely have as much health as like the Hinox or the Stone Talus, and they're probably more involved and more difficult to fight too. There's more to these fights than both of those bosses. So these things can be interrupted as well. If I shoot them in like I tried to the first time I saw one like the first few times I saw them I would just run. And at one point I realized that I could shoot them in the eye and stun them. And if you shoot them in the eye and stun them, that might give you enough time to get away from them. You cannot outrun these things on foot. You can outrun them by like climbing a cliff if you don't get shot down the cliff, but you'll probably get shot down the cliff. The best way to like get away from these things is to jump down because they won't follow you down if you're not on horseback. If you're on horseback, you can't outrun them. But um, but yeah, you can shoot them in the eye. But the thing is, the ones that are mobile are not going to make that easy for you. They make it impressively difficult to hit them in the eye. They will move around erratically on purpose to try to prevent you from aiming at their eye while they aim perfectly at you, because they're robots. And so the player then has to kind of like think about that. And this is this thought process that leads to figuring out how to destroy the Guardians is one of the most fluid, interesting parts of this game. And it again feeds back into that power over your world, power over the elements kind of theme that this game has, which is gradually figuring out how to take back this technology. A lot of people are gonna like misinterpret the technology in this game as that this game is about nature versus technology. That's not what this game is about. This game is about like mankind taking back technology for themselves because eventually you'll get like gear made out of that technology in order to combat that technology, like just feeding back into that feeling like I'm using this technology back now to like fucking take to kill you guys. I'm using these arrows that I made out of this technology to kill you guys. I'm using like this armor that I made out of like dead parts of you guys. um but you have to gradually figure out how to fight these things, and you get that stuff what mega late game. Um, so you have to figure out how to hit them, how to target them. Um, Eventually, you'll realize that you can slow down time in the air when you're aiming an arrow, and that's enough. But I didn't realize that until like a while in that I could do that. Um, I guess, people that played this that saw the trailers for this game would know that, but I sure didn't. Um, but then I learned that you can hack off their if you target their like tentacles, you can hack them off. And if you hack off all of them, then they can't move anymore and they can't erratically move around while they're targeting you. So then I'm like, okay, now I know how to fight you guys. I hack off your legs and then I stun lock you and hit you while you're stunned from like hitting you in the eye. But their initial movement is still a problem. Like, how do you stun them to get close enough to hack off their legs without getting blown up? And then you realize the like most important thing, which is, oh shit, I can parry their laser shot back at them. That's like the big revelation that people will have at some point. And because that thing is doing that is hard. Doing that is very difficult. But once you realize you can do it, the entire mentality of fighting these things, the entire like mentality you've had towards these guardians changes at that point. Once you understand all of the tools at your disposal and all of the different weak points they have and all of the ways to deal with them, this the feeling of seeing guardians on the map it goes from feeling like you're being hunted to feeling like you're the hunter. Like gradually throughout the game, it changes to the point where you get excited when you see a guardian because you can kill it for parts. Like it goes from being the hunted to being the hunter, and it feels fantastic. That's a thing. And I think a lot of people misinterpret the easiness of killing these guardians eventually because, oh man, they're too easy once you figure out what to do. That's the fucking point. Once you know what to do, you're the hunter. Now you're fucking targeting these things. Um, Maybe the music should change at that point. I don't know. It's really cool though. The way the Guardians are handled in this game is one of the most important like contributors towards the feeling that you're gaining power over the world around you. Um, but again, they have very much like given you the sense of wonderment that you've expected from Zelda games in the past in a new way with this game. I don't think that's deniable. That's why it's gotten all these perfect tens, because it does feel new. It does feel like a big step forward for the video game industry in that way. I'm not claiming that it is that step forward, but I can see where reviewers were coming from when they played this game and they thought that. I would say that for the first 30 or 40 hours of me playing this game, I was consistently saying to myself, like, with all the things that kept happening that were crazy, I was consistently being like, this is the fucking best thing I've ever played. This is insane. Like, this is what I've wanted open world games to be. This is what I've wanted a video game to be like for a long time. You'll say that to yourself, and eventually some of that wonderment will wear off. It never completely wears off. You're always going to be finding adventures until you've done them all. So, but it does get a little grindy at the end, just a little bit. Especially with the Korok seeds. There's like 900 of these Korok seeds, like laying around, and I'm never gonna fucking go for all of them. Okay, so it's been several days since I last recorded a segment of this, and this is getting unbelievably long, so I'm gonna try to wrap it up now. I'm not saying it's gonna not take a little bit longer, but I have a list here of the things I haven't mentioned yet, and so yeah, let's just continue doing that. I was gonna mention more about the lack of tools, or the apparent lack of tools, and why I think that there actually are just as many tools in this game as any other Zelda game. They're just kind of hidden or more interwoven into the controls than the usual. So, as far as what you get on your Sheikah Slate, these are the main tools that the game knows that you will always have. There are uh, five of those. Five, yeah, five, and I've explained what those are already. And they're all multifaceted and they're all really cool. Let's talk about what might be missing, though. Like, what kind of tools from other Zelda games aren't here that are conspicuous? First is the bow and arrow, but that is there. That's wired to your the right R2 button. You'll always have bows, so that's a thing you'll always have, and the game can always expect you to do that, and you will be using bows to solve lots of puzzles. Um, there's also a mechanic that's in some Zelda games, but not all, which is some kind of gliding mechanic. And you have a paraglider, and that's also wired to a button. If you jump, and there's a jump button in this Zelda game, it's practically not even a fucking Zelda game anymore with a jump button, right? But yeah, there is a jump button, and if you press the jump button after the jump button, then you'll activate a paraglider, which would have been an inventory slot in something like the Wind Waker, right? So there's another tool that you'll always have. Um, what else is missing? Well, the boomerang I mentioned is there. A lot of people might mention that there's something along the lines of like a mask of truth. That's something that's a lot in a lot of Zelda games, something along those lines. And I would argue that even that is kind of there. I mentioned I would talk more about like the scanning. When you first like tap L to bring up whatever tool you have selected, whatever Sheikah Slate tool. So either every time you press that button, it kind of changes the environment around you and brings up like this kind of scanning HUD that highlights things that you can interact with on the ground. Um, and I would argue that that kind of satisfies whatever mask of truth a Zelda game would typically have. Because what does the mask of truth really allow you to do as a tool in a Zelda game? It allows you to see things that aren't there that help you solve puzzles, or point things out that you wouldn't have noticed otherwise. And that's exactly what this scanning system does. Um, you'll find yourself very quickly in this game using that to try to find things that you can interact with in order to solve puzzles a lot of the time. Especially with the stasis, because the stasis seems to like highlight things from really far away. So I would even argue that the Mask of Truth is sort of in this game, in that scanning system. I'm sure you could argue against that, and I'm not even completely like solid on my argument there, but I think you could make that argument. So what else is missing? The most conspicuous thing that I hear people talking about a lot is the hook shot, and I think, it's I would hesitate to think that Nintendo didn't think pretty hard about whether or not to put the hookshot in this game or something like the hookshot. And I'm on the fence about whether or not they should have put it in. I can understand why they didn't, because climbing is a huge mechanic in this game. So to have something like the hookshot that can immediately cling you onto a faraway cliff sounds on paper like something that's overpowered. Except I don't know if it is. To be honest, I don't know if it is, because one thing that the game does give you about midway through the game, well, not midway, depending on when you do stuff, every time you finish a dungeon boss, every time you finish a dungeon, you'll get a reward of some sort that kind of like augments your skill set, augments your abilities. Nothing that is required to solve puzzles. In fact, I don't think you can even use them inside of shrines. Um, but you get something from each like finishing each divine beast that helps you. And they're all completely overpowered. And by the end of the game, once you've done all four, if you don't turn them off, you do have the option, thankfully, to turn them off. But if you don't turn them off, you are the most overpowered Link in any Zelda game ever. It's kind of amazing. But I already kind of went into detail on why I think that's okay and why that's actually might be the point. Is once you've finished getting those four divine beasts, you've gotten power over your world. You are the hunter now. So I think it's okay to make Link overpowered, even though some people might disagree with me. Um, and you can turn them off if you want. But anyway, the tools you get, one of them specifically, I feel like they could have easily replaced with the hookshot. What you get is this spell called Rivali's Gale. If you press the jump button and then continue holding the jump button after you've fallen back on the ground, then you'll make this charge thing that kind of gives you a big leap. Basically, the reason I'm comparing this to the hookshot is that it functions in a way to kind of give you a jump start when you're trying to climb a cliff, which is really what the hookshot would do in this game, right? It would just something that so you don't have to immediately start climbing from the bottom. Once you get Rivali's Gale, it's super liberating, but it's also a little bit overpowered. I think that thing takes you a little bit higher than it should, and the cooldown on it is a little too short. It's pretty abusable, especially later on. Um, but again, maybe that's the point. I think that to say things are just objectively overpowered in this game from a gameplay standpoint might be missing the point of what this game is going for in terms of empowering you as you play along, because none of this stuff is things that you have to begin with. So, I mean, but I think that they could have easily replaced Rivali's Gale with the hookshot, and I think that people would probably on the whole be happier with it. I don't even think they needed to use the hookshot as a puzzle solving tool. And it would have worked kind of seamlessly in the shrines too, because the shrines you actually can't climb on walls. So I think that they could just do the hookshot thing the way that they did it in the dungeons in the other games, where you have like certain visible panels that you can hookshot to. But I mean, the hookshot is like the one thing that I think is like conspicuously missing, but also based on what this game focuses on, I think it would be naive to think that Nintendo didn't put a lot of thought into this themselves, and I think that there's an argument to be made for not putting the hookshot in this game explicitly. Um, but yeah, I mean, let's count this up. Hold on. So five tools in your Sheikah slate. Paraglider makes 6. Bow and arrow makes 7. Um, Boomerang, if you count that, makes 8. Honestly, I would count that because the boomerang has about as much use in this game as it does in other Zelda games, barring maybe the Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. Um, oh yeah, there's the hammer. Like to be honest, there is a hammer. Like there are hammer weapons in this game, and the hammer weapons honestly serve the exact same purpose that they did in any other Zelda game. Hammers in these Zelda games as a tool have always been pretty throwaway. Um, and the hammers in this game, the things that are classified as like blunt instruments, can be used in all of the ways that you would expect to be able to use a hammer in previous Zelda games. For instance, they'll very easily destroy ore veins. They're very useful to carry around just for like mining. They're also useful to carry around because they're the only things besides bombs that can kill like the rock monsters. They can actually just do deliberate damage to them. They do a lot of things that you would expect hammers to do and serve a purpose that is distinct from regular weapons. So I would actually say hammers are in this game the way they are in other Zelda games. So that's 9. And then I just thought of something that is definitely missing that makes me a little frustrated, which is I mentioned earlier how unbelievably slow swimming is in this game. You can get a set of gear that will speed up your swimming. Each piece of the gear, there's a leg piece and a chest piece and a head piece, and all of them make you a little faster. So wearing them all makes swimming barely tolerable. But there's still a serious lack of depth to the swimming mechanics. It's an unbelievable lack of depth. This is a Zelda game that prides itself on exploration that puts things underwater that you cannot actually dive at all. You cannot go underwater in this game, period. There's no way to do it. I find that a little absurd, especially since water mechanics, swimming mechanics, have been something that the Zelda games have been wrestling with since the beginning. and they kind of almost had it down between Majora's Mask, Zora Link, and Link swimming from Skyward Sword. I'm pretty. They kind of had it. They kind of had it down, and I feel like with gyroscope controls, it would be pretty seamless to make Link swim pretty well. But as it stands, there's not only no way to dive, but the iron boots that would let you swim, sink, and move around underwater are also missing. So with both of those things combined, you kind of get this feeling that water is just off limits in this game, which is very strange. It's a very strange feeling. I think water is a much more constricting thing in this game than it should have been. Like I said, you can use Cryonis to like jump across like pillars that you're making as you move, and that's actually pretty fast, but it's also pretty ridiculous. It's pretty ridiculous to think that that is actually the fastest way to get around like on the water, is to just like continually press L, press A on the water, make a pillar, jump to the pillar, probably climb to the pillar because you missed like you didn't make it perfectly close or far. Um, and like some of the time like you'll make the pillar and then you'll fall to the bottom and then like the pillar will glitch out and blow up because it thinks that you're sinking under it and they don't want you to be underwater, so they like destroy the pillar. It's weird. There's a lack of water mechanics to this game for sure. There is a couple cool things involving that gear. Link's water gear that he gets, that you can get. You're guaranteed at least a chest piece by playing through the game, but the headpiece and the pants you have to acquire separately. Um, they do give you something that lets you swim up waterfalls, which looks hilarious. It looks really cool, actually. I love that mechanic. Swimming up waterfalls feels great. Um, it looks great. It looks cool. So that's pretty fun. To have the ability to swim up waterfalls is pretty fun. But just getting to the waterfall is borderline intolerable. Swimming at all in this game without switching to that armor is really, really unbelievably slow. But I'm getting a little off topic. I was talking about tools. So I think I counted total like let's count the swimming up waterfalls as a tool itself. That's 10 tools. That's a lot. That's more than it initially seems. So I would say that there is no real lack of tools to this game. There's a few things that are conspicuously missing, such as the hookshot and ability to kind of just do anything in the water. But other than that, I think the tool there. I think the game did a really good job with tools in this game. Maybe the best job since their last game, Skyward Sword, which was I think Skyward Sword did a great job with its tools also, um, but in a more restrictive way, which is exactly what the common criticism of Skyward Sword was. Like one of the cool things Skyward Sword did, I thought it was cool, but a lot of people probably hate it, is that they chose to give you the bow and arrow at the very end of the game. And that was super deliberate. And the reason that they did that, I think, is to basically force you to figure out creative ways to use your other tools. Not having the bow and arrow, not having that straight, like, ranged damage option, forced you to think about how to do other things at range to serve the same purpose. You would be thinking more about using the whip or the beetle or the slingshot, which actually just stunned people briefly, stuff like that. Um, and so you would be forced to get creative with those tools, and then finally at the end of the game, they say, okay, you've struggled enough. Here's the bow and arrow, and I thought that was very smart of them actually. As long as you're doing Zelda in that direction, where you're forcing the player down a straight path, I think that was a solution. I think that this game has a better solution to its tool use, which is just make all the tools useful and give them all to you from the start. But I'm starting to drone on about this. So, hey guys, Tex from the future here again. I'm here to point out a few tools that I forgot to mention just now because I'm about to stop talking about tools, and I just wanted to acknowledge a few other cool things that the game did with tools. One of them is fire, ice, and electricity. Got a lot of interesting use in this game. Um, Fire, for instance, you have fire arrows, and then so fire, ice, and electricity. You have fire, ice, and electric arrows, but you also have these chew jelly things that you get from killing choo-choos. Or is it just chews? Is it one chew or two chews? Whatever. They drop their jelly, and first of all, if you kill them with like an electric weapon, they'll drop electric jelly no matter what they were. Like they like change their molecular structure or something. It's crazy. But if you put the chew jelly on the ground, and hit it with something, it'll explode, and do whatever its elemental thing was, and that elemental thing is the same as what the elemental arrows do. And fire is pretty cool because you can shoot grass and create an updraft that you can like soar upwards with your with your paraglider, and so that you can use that. Like I ended up using that a bunch of times in the middle of a fight to like get on top of like outposts or like slow down time with my arrows or just do cool things like that. Um, and again, like another that's another reason why Rivali's Gale just probably shouldn't be in this game because until I got that, I was forced to do a lot of like crafty things with fire to like make things happen that were like jump oriented. So yeah, Rivali's Gale is just bad. Um, Ice arrows, they do what they do what you think they do. They just freeze people. They don't do a whole lot more than that, from what I can remember. Electricity is like something that's really never been in a Zelda game before as like an elemental thing, and I think it's much more interesting than light. What it does is it kind of like it's a mini stun, kind of it ice. If ice is like a regular stun, then electricity is like a mini stun, but it's an AoE. So if you shoot one electric arrow, it will actually like potentially electrify multiple people. And if you shoot an electric arrow at water, it will do it to like everyone in a giant area. And not only that, what's really cool about it is that it actually forces them to drop their weapons. So like let's say you see and what's weird about the damage calculations in this game is that it actually has absolutely nothing to do with like the difficulty of the enemy that you're fighting. Like bigger enemies will have harder to dodge attack animations and just like have animations that are more aggressive, but they actually the damage that enemies do completely depends on what they're using weapon wise. So if you see an enemy using like a scary weapon that you know will kill you in one hit, you can like shoot it with an electric arrow and then run over and grab the thing while they're still electrocuted and then beat them to death with that. So that's pretty cool. Electricity is interesting in this game. Um, other and so that's like three more tools right there. And then there's a couple other tools. There's the balloons. Those like if you kill Octoroks, they like give you balloons, and you can attach the balloons to like anything and make that thing float. And that is useful for all sorts of hijinks. There was one point in like this stealth segment where there's a whole bunch of people that are like they really like bananas, and you can distract them with bananas. And I was like, I knew there was a way for me to do this puzzle without doing what I did, but I couldn't really figure it out. So what I did was I dropped a banana on the ground, and then I attached a balloon to it to make it float, and then I took out a Deku Leaf, which is another tool that I forgot to mention, which is just it blows gales. So you have something to blow gales with, and you can get a Deku Leaf whenever you want it just by chopping down a tree, and it does the exact same thing that the Deku Leaf did in the Wind Waker when you're not using it as a paraglider. So Link actually has that item in all of its different forms of use. But anyway, I dropped this banana on the ground, and then I attached the balloon to it, and then I took out a Deku Leaf and made it go like against the wall, and then I shot it with an arrow to make the banana fall on the ground, and then he got distracted by the banana, and I jumped down and killed him. So it's kind of idiotic that I can't just throw the banana. The game actually doesn't give you that option. But the fact that I could solve a puzzle by attaching a balloon to a banana and then blowing the balloon away and then shooting the balloon with an arrow, that's a sign of a good game right there. Let me just say that much. Um, anything else? No, that's it. So I think I really did lay out every tool now. So now past me is going to take it away and continue talking about the armor. Now that I talked about tools, I kind of started to touch on armor, so I want to mention armor some more. There's a lot of different. Link's tunic is not in this game, but he has armor sets, kind of like you have in an RPG. But it's a little underselling it to say that the armor sets in this game are the most exciting items to acquire. There's relatively few armor sets, and all of them serve a very unique purpose. So there is an armor set that helps you climb faster. There's an armor set that makes you resistant to electricity. There's an armor set that makes you more stealthy. There's an armor set for every little thing. All of them look fantastic. I'm sure people will come up with favorites. I really like the stealth set, actually. I didn't like it at first because it made Link kind of look like a girl. But I don't know. That combined with like the energy weapons just seems really cool to me. I liked moving around as Stealth Link the most. Um, and they all look great and they're cool, but the weird thing about them in this game is that you're switching them out constantly. Link in this game gets dressed and undressed like nonstop. You'll come to a cliff and you can't not switch to like your climbing gear at a cliff, right? Because if you have gear that help you climb faster, you're gonna use it. To not use it would be to undervalue your own time spent. So you have to do it. You have to press start, switch to this climbing gear. Then you'll climb up. Then you'll want to switch back into your your normal gear that you like that you're wearing just because you like Link's looks, and you'll come to maybe like a water stream, and you'll switch into your Zora gear to swim around. And then you'll come to another place, and you'll come up to like a hard fight, and you'll equip all of your like armor gear to like fight, and then you're constantly switching out your equipment in this game. And there's nothing stopping you from doing so. You can do it in the middle of a fight. You can do it in the water. You can do it in the air. You can do it whenever you feel like it. And it feels very clunky, especially considering how seamless the rest of the item usage is in this game. Um, I don't know. I don't know if I like that. I think that on subsequent playthroughs, I'm probably just going to pick one armor set and stick to it. But like during this playthrough, I was switching out armor nonstop, like minute by minute, and it just felt like Random Wardrobe Simulator 2017 or something. It was a very strange mechanic to have in this game. Made the whole game feel a little bit clunky. But the clothing itself is great, and it was the most exciting stuff to get. There's like few enough sets that it's exciting whenever you find something, and some of them actually give you legit things, like the Zora helmet, the water helmet, actually gives you like a spin attack in the water, and it's just in a chest somewhere underwater. Like I found it completely on like by accident. It was just it was in a chest that was as conspicuous as like a chest that would normally contain 20 rupees just lying around. That's a cool that really adds to the sense of wonderment in this kind of a game. Being able to just find stuff like that, like unintentionally, is a really cool feeling. But anyway, let's see what else is on this list of things to say. Um, okay, yeah, I was going to talk about shrines. I was talked a little bit about shrines before and how I was a little disappointed by the sameness of them, and also by the fact that um, a lot of them are just like, here's your reward, you earned it already, or like the fights, those stupid fights. And since making my last like commentary video, I've found like 5 more of those, and maybe less puzzles. I seem to be finding more and more of them as I play the game. Um, and that's something I've noticed actually, is that there's the shrines in this game, the actual puzzle shrines, the quality shrines are very front heavy. It seems to me like the shrine locations were put in the game first, and then after that there was a team of people expected to just kind of fill in as many of the shrines as possible as the development process went on. So what they did was they probably started out filling out like the shrines in the areas that the player is going to like statistically very few players actually finish a video game. I think it's like 97% or something of people that play a video game will never finish it. Think about that as a developer. Think about that, what that does to your mentality. So if you're thinking about like what you want to prioritize, the order like in which you're making quality shrines, it's probably going to be the areas that the player is more likely to go to in the beginning of the game. And that's where all the quality shrines are for the most part. The shrines that are the most conspicuous, the most obvious, the ones that are like on the direct path to getting to the divine beasts. Most of the hidden shrines are actually garbage. The ones that are really hidden are not actually very fun, which is super disappointing. Like, and I see in my head a clear solution to this. In fact, I thought that my suggested solution that I'm about to give was actually what the game was doing, but it isn't. What I thought was going on in this game, which and my initial worry was that these shrines, because I can find them in any order, would be too simplistic all the time. And I started to feel like there was something else going on, because it seemed like for a while, for the first 30 or 40 hours, the shrines actually were ramping up in complexity. It seemed that way to me. And so what I was starting to think was that the shrines were actually like a separate progression. In other words, like I thought that what was going on was when you go down into a shrine, it would like it's not necessarily going to be the same shrine as like what someone else would have gotten at that place. It would have been like the shrines themselves are like progression based. So first you would get this shrine, then you would get this shrine, then you would get this shrine, etc., etc. And that they were, it would be a different they would be populated differently from game to game. And I was happy with that. I really did like that. I don't think it's like strictly like that. I never thought it was like strictly like that. But for example, like the desert area, all of the shrines there that are puzzles are based on like electricity and solving circuits. And so what I was thinking the way I thought the game was working, because the first shrine I found there was the tutorial shrine. There's one shrine that is like very much a here's how circuitry works, and it's a super simple puzzle. There's nothing to it. It's just like here's how circuitry works. Solve this shrine, and then you're done. Um, and then the next shrine I found kind of built on that, and then the shrine I found after that built on that, and it got more and more complicated, and then you finally get to the divine beast, and it's like nothing but that. And that led me to believe that this game was like at least locally progression based. That the first shrine you get in like the Gerudo Desert area is guaranteed to be that tutorial shrine, and then shrines after that would be building on that mechanic to make sure that the player like absorbed the puzzles in the right order. And I was wrong. That is not how it works. I think I was just lucky that I found the tutorial shrine first. Um, it definitely isn't. I can just confirm at this point that it is not like that. However, I really do think it should be like that, because at this point, all of the shrines I'm finding are disappointing. Like, it just seems like all of the shrines I'm finding are disappointing. I've done about 13 or 14 more since the last time I made one of these videos, or the last time I recorded, and I think 6 of them have been fights, and like 3 of them have been, I didn't even mention this yet, there's these gyroscope puzzles that are just terrible. They're just fucking garbage. Um, One of them was tolerable, and the rest of them so far have been just absolutely infuriating. And they're so weird. These shrines are obviously like a relic from back when this game was being developed, like very early on in the Wii U's life cycle, because these are the kinds of like novelty shrines. Basically, if you don't know what I'm talking about, like basically if you ever go down into a shrine and see the word apparatus, it's the name of the shrine followed by the word apparatus. It's this thing that you click on or press A on that make you basically manipulate something somewhere in the shrine by moving around the controller physically. So if you like tilt the controller forward, the thing that you're controlling will tilt also, and backwards and so forth. And you're expected to solve puzzles like that by making things slide around, by like finding certain directions to look at something from, by like making balls move around. And it's like it's a novelty that's basically supposed to advertise a feature of the Wii U that was a big part of like how it was like meant to be used when when the Wii U first came out. But the thing is, at this point, that's not necessary. Gyro controls have been vindicated already to the point where like, and they're vindicated in this game. The gyro assisted aiming of the bow and stuff in this game is such that I almost never want to play a console game again that has like first person aiming or third person aiming that doesn't have gyro assisted controls. It would just be such a step down. The gyro controls are fantastic for that. They're so good. Um, and and so then you've got these shrines that are like, hey, look at this gyro feature, and it's like, yeah, I already know about it. I already know about it, and this is not a good use of the gyro. It's just like this forced novelty thing that's infuriating to mess with. And the reason it's infuriating to me, at least, is because my Wii U's kind of old, and my Wii U gamepad the battery is like on its last legs. It doesn't last very long. Like the battery in the Wii U gamepad for me lasts like an hour, if that. So I normally just play with the thing plugged in. And so I have this wire like attached to my gamepad, and so I'm like expected to like take this thing and like turn it over. So I have to take my Wii U gamepad and flip it around. So this wire that's attached to my Wii U gamepad, like charging it, is getting wrapped around the stupid thing, and I have to untangle it as I go, and it's infuriating. And then on top of that, the most infuriating part of this is the fact that you have to press the B button to get out of this like mode in which you're manipulating stuff. So let's say that you need to like flip something completely over and then press B to leave it there without actually turning it back, because it's pretty sensitive. How do I do that? Where the fuck is the B button? I don't know. I can't see it. It's on the bottom side. It's like it's hard to find. It's just a mess. I don't know. These now there's three types of shrines that are just kind of like ripoffs, and at this point in the game, I'm getting seemingly mostly them. So I would say in the next Zelda game, first of all, populate your shrines. Make sure that you're not make your shrines as you go. Don't like put 120 shrine locations down and then panic at the last minute as you miss the deadline and have to fill all the shrines with garbage, because I guarantee that's what happened. I guarantee that they were working on the shrines consistently throughout the game development. They had all the shrines placed on the map, and then that team was just like alerted, yo, the game has to come out in like 2 months. You done yet? And they had 60 shrines done, and they were like, oh shit. And so they had to just like scrape together whatever they could, and they probably had to redistribute them and fill them in. And every Zelda game has some kind of sign that it was a little rushed out, and I think this is that sign that that there's just not enough shrines. There's not enough unique puzzle-based shrines. So I would say, regardless of if you're going to continue doing shrines or something like shrines in a Zelda game in the future, I would recommend to Nintendo that they make it progression based. There's no need to assign specific shrines to locations. Like make it you can like enforce some like linearity there. Like if you've ever played like the Walking Dead games or the Telltale like games, that they take advantage of like that illusion of choice pretty well. And I don't think that having a like set progression to the shrines, regardless of the order that you actually find them, would really affect the game very much. I think it could really only improve it. So that would be my suggestion. Is like have an actual distinct progression to the shrines, at least locally. So let's see what else is on this list of stuff. Probably a lot of what I'm about to say has been said already, and in much better, more succinct fashion, in a much better prepared video. I noticed that King K put out like an hour and a half long critique on this game already, and I watched some of it already, but um, this is more for me to kind of summarize my thoughts and get my thoughts in order on this game than for anything else. Oh yeah, voice acting. Let's talk about voice acting. It's in this game. They have some, and it's just bad. It's just straight up bad. It's none of it is good, and it's amazing to me because video games are not like anime. Like Nintendo relies on its Western audience for a significant, if not majority, of its revenue, and so because and I'm the reason I'm saying this is because it really feels like they scraped. It really feels like they like skimped on the voice acting in this game financially. It seems like they didn't really like seek out the best of the best in terms of who was like what the voice talent in this game, because this voice talent is not talent. The woman that voiced Zelda probably should never voice Zelda again, and should maybe never do a British voice in a game again. I don't know if she's British, like I don't know if she's actually British, but I kind of doubt it. It seems kind of like a made up. It seems kind of like a fake British accent for one thing. Um, and a lot of people are saying, yeah, Zelda's voice actress is bad, but the rest of the game is all right. First of all, Zelda is like Zelda talks more like 4 or 5 times more than anyone else in this game, like maybe 10 times as much. Very few people say anything except for Zelda. So to say that as like a defense of the voice acting in this game is not a defense. Second of all, even if it was, I don't agree with you because I feel like the majority of the voice acting in this game I could have done better, and I'm not a voice actor. Like there are certain parts where like you could tell they were reading it for the first time. Like especially some of the what's the Goron guy? The Goron ancestor has a few sentences where you can tell he hadn't read the script, and he just kind of like continued the sentence on not really understanding the character's own inflection. Like it's just a mess. It's just amazing to me because the Zelda series didn't need voice acting, and another thing is that there's barely any of it. Like there's so little voice acting in this game. It's reserved for like important cutscenes only, and even then, like they'll have like a version of they'll have a cutscene, they'll have a portion of the cutscene, like they'll have a portion of the cutscene, um, they'll have a portion of the cutscene voice acted, like a very small, like 10 or 15 second chunk of it. They play there's a scene basically every time you get to a new area and meet like that area's leader, and they'll say like one thing, and it'll show like their name above their character, and then it'll go back to like a regular cutscene, and they'll just be talking in text. Like, what was the point of that? Was it really that important to you guys to have voice acting in your game? Because not only did you just interrupt the flow of the game, the screen had to go black and then not go black, just so that you could say one or two words for like your dramatic intro, and then it went back out. And having voice acting in this game, having voice acting in any game, really ups the expected quality of writing for the dialogue. If I'm able to just read bad dialogue, I probably won't realize that it's bad. I'll probably be able to just skip over it because I want to have a good time with the game. If I hear a character insist on saying something in the way that it probably I'm not saying this well. The reason I watch anime subtitled most of the time is because saying that translated text out loud sounds terrible, usually, most of the time. Unless the dub is really good or it was like made for a Western audience to begin with, like Space Dandy or something. Like the Zelda games, I'm not going to claim that have always had like especially good dialogue. And this game is probably no better and no worse. But when you have it voice acted, when you have Zelda like failing to have when you have Zelda like saying these things out loud, it just takes me right out of the experience. And I wish like I was way more into the game emotionally and just like kind of mentally, like physically. Whenever I was way more into the game whenever there wasn't any voice acting. Whenever the characters were just talking, I was like, man, I wish it would just stay like this. I wish I could just turn voice acting off because I would be able to get so much more invested in the story here. But every time I hear someone talk, it just sounds like low quality. It's like it sounds bad. It sounds like low quality voice acting, and it takes me right out of the experience. And there's no way to turn it off, of course, because there's no options in a Nintendo game. Nintendo games force you to play the game a very specific way, and it's. I just wish I could turn it off. I don't see the point of having it at all. There's barely any of it, and it's just amazing to me. Like Nintendo of America had to be the people that I don't know like the reputation that Nintendo of Europe has, or like if that's even what they're called over there. But Nintendo of America used to be so good at localizing their games. Like if you voice acted the Paper Mario games, that would sound probably fantastic because the Paper Mario games are brilliantly translated. They sound great, or they're just hilarious. Like I don't think you could fuck that game up by translating it because the writing is just really on par. But since then, it's just been downhill. It seems like Nintendo's localization teams are just getting lazier and lazier, and it's just the voice acting. Matthew Matosis in one of his Zelda videos said that he had no doubt that if there was ever voice acting in a Zelda game, it would be an unmitigated disaster. I don't think that I'm willing to say that it's an unmitigated disaster here. It didn't like ruin the game, but I sure wish it wasn't here. I sure wish that it just that wasn't there because, again, Nintendo, if you're going to put voice acting in your game, you have to make it good. There's no point in putting voice acting in a Zelda game unless it's going to improve the experience. And what you did with the voice acting in this game is actively take me out of the experience every time I heard these people's voices, especially Zelda. Um, like Link as a silent protagonist is fine, at least still, thank God. And they kept his Japanese voice actor in terms of like the grunts and stuff that he makes, so he still sounds normal. You can't even turn the voices to Japanese. You can't even hear the Japanese version of the voices in this game. Like, why? I don't get it. Why? So anyway, what else? Um, Calamity Ganon is like the villain of this game, and it's definitely like the most abstract version of evil that Ganon has ever taken on in a Zelda game. It's definitely like a generalized, like abstract evil. Ganon is not a character in this game. Ganon is like some kind of energy thing at this point. It's weird. I don't. And I think I'm okay with that personally. I think it's fine. Like I said earlier, and like I continue to like just kind of argue throughout this, is that I think this game is all about like taking back power. And Ganon kind of represents this like he's taken all of the power and you're kind of taking it back. And Ganon, I don't know why they insist on putting the word calamity in front of his name every time. It sounds kind of stupid. Calamity Ganon sounds kind of overly melodramatic and kind of cheesy. But especially when fucking Zelda says it. Uh, but the game definitely seems to lack a villainous presence, despite that. Because of that, because Ganon is not a character that talks. He's just this energy force. So I think the game could have benefited from a character like Zant or like what's his name? What was the Ganon's sword's name from Skyward Sword? Giramin. It could have get. I think the game really could have benefited from like a more a villain that actually talked and had some presence in the game. But as it stands, I think it's fine because basically what this game is about is it's about you taking agency over your world, taking power back for yourself. Um, and so for Ganon to be represented in this game by some kind of abstract source of power um, and destruction and stuff seems okay actually. I kind of just I don't really think they should have made Ganon any different. I just think that there's no point in putting the word fucking calamity in front of his name, and I also think that the game could have benefited from like a villain of some sort, like an actual villain. And with that, do I have anything else to say? I haven't finished the game yet. I've done the fourth shrine. I liked the way it started. I this video is already absurdly long probably, so I think I'm just gonna wrap this up and put it out. I'm probably just gonna put some image on top. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the new Zelda. I kind of just wanted to like lay everything out, mostly for myself, because the Zelda series means a lot to me, and I think that this Zelda is a step in the right direction if your objective is to preserve preserve the Zelda franchise well into the future. I think that this is the right step in terms of that. But don't believe anybody that tells you this game is perfect because it's not. In fact, it's not even close. The reason that those 10 out of 10s were given is understandable, but it's also a sign of extreme short-sightedness on the part of the reviewers. Oh, I just remembered one last thing I want to talk about. Jim Sterling. This is kind of the reason I made this video. The weapon durability. That's one thing I wanted to talk about. So that's probably the central thing that you're hearing as a complaint about this game right now is weapon durability as a system and Jim Sterling made this video where he really slammed weapon durability systems in general, using Zelda as like a clear example on like how not to do it. And all of the arguments he gave were trash. I really do think that that was one of the worst videos I've ever seen Jim Sterling put out. I like Jim Sterling. I'm not going to unsubscribe from him because of that video, but I really did think that that video showed a sign that he really. I think that something that happens a lot with game reviewers is that they tend to. It's hard for them not to embrace quantity over quality at some point because they're expected to play so many different games and have an insightful opinion on all of them that they become more concerned with getting it done than they do concerned with like actually having a well thought out opinion. And I think that Jim Sterling is falling a little bit victim to that. The stuff that he does with respect to like his green light stuff and his coverage of like how fucked up Steam is and everything, I think that that's very valuable, and I'm really glad that he exists to do that. But I think that his actual opinions on the games themselves are starting to suffer a little bit from his understandable desire to play everything and have an opinion on everything. Because I think that if he stopped to think at all about why the weapon durability systems in Zelda are in Zelda, he would have realized that a lot of what he's saying just doesn't even apply, and also just isn't much of an argument. So I guess I'll break it down. So the first kind of thing that he says is that weapon durability systems are okay. Well, Jim's central argument that was basically that weapon durability systems were boring to the player, and that the function they served didn't justify the inclusion. He seems to think that the only reason that weapons durability systems are in a game, and that includes the Zelda game implicitly. He didn't say it specifically was about this, I don't think, but this was his argument. So, you know, was that they are to add a sense of realism to the game. And if you really think that that's why the weapon durability systems are in this Zelda game, then I just don't even know how you could have possibly played this game more than 15 minutes, because that's so obviously not why they're here. Like, who the fuck plays Zelda games for realism? Nobody plays Zelda games for the realism. And the weapon durability systems in this game sure are not realistic. I don't know what fucking realistic world takes place in which every fucking weapon is made of glass, because that's essentially what this game is. Like, some people are also arguing that, yeah, the weapon durability system sucks at first, but then you get good weapons and they don't break as fast. That's also bullshit. The weapons still break pretty fucking fast. You can waste like three... There are these Lynels in the game that have a shitload of health that you have to fight, and you'll break like 3 good weapons just trying to kill them because they have so much health. Like, if you think that that's okay, you're right, it is okay. I actually do like the weapon durability system, but that's obviously not like an argument that that it gets better over time. That's not a good argument. You should be thinking about, why is this here in the first place? And the reason it's there is for a few reasons. So bottom line is, I approve of the weapon durability system. Here's why. I think that, first of all, it forces the player to try everything, and that's great. One of the things that is a very personal thing that I've never really loved about the Dark Souls games is that the Dark Souls games kind of expect you to pick one weapon and pretty much stick to it for the whole game. They really do expect you to to make multiple playthroughs in which you pick different weapons and just use those weapons for the whole game. That is not how this game works. This Zelda game wants you to use everything. They want you to be crafty. It's not about like being good at the game. It's about being smart. It's about using your knowledge about the environment to your advantage. So to have you stick to one weapon and not really have any knowledge about how spears work or how two-handed axes work or something like that would be to kind of like skimp you a little bit on what the expected feeling is of playing this game. You're supposed to feel like you have to be crafty to survive, that you have to like know things to survive. And so there's going to be times in this game, because of the weapon durability system specifically, there's going to be times where you just don't have the equipment that you feel like you need for a fight, and you're going to have to get clever. You're going to have to do something very funny. Like maybe you don't have, maybe all you have is like a little traveler's sword. And so what you have to, and this happened to me once, is there was a thunderstorm, and all I had on me was a traveler's sword, and I wanted to kill these enemies. So what I did was I snuck in there while they were sleeping, and I just dropped the thing on the ground and just let lightning hit it and kill all of them by the lightning strike. Or, and so there's lots of crafty things that you can do in these fights. You can make boulders fall on people with stasis. You can mess with explosive barrels. You can get sneak attack kills. You can hit people with metal objects that you can manipulate. There's all sorts of ways, and you can bomb people. There's so many different ways to approach a fight. And if you didn't have a weapon durability system like the one that's in place in this game, a lot of people would just never experience that kind of thinking. And so that is argument A on why this should be in the game. And Jim Sterling never even mentioned that. Nothing even close to being along those lines in his 10-minute video, and I'm just astounded by that. What was this other argument? He also argued, well, I mean, yeah, that really is the central argument, is that the weapon durability system is there to force variety on the player. And if you don't like that, if you don't like that kind of being forced to do something, that is a valid argument. But to say that the weapon durability system is just boring and doesn't serve a purpose is to completely misunderstand what this game is even going for. So yeah, that was kind of the central reason that I started to think about putting an opinion on Zelda out there on YouTube, is because mostly for Jim Sterling's video. I watched it and I was like, this guy, I haven't seen much analysis of this game, and I feel like people are saying some dumbass shit. So that was kind of the main main reason for me to step forward and make this. And that's kind of funny because I didn't think to do it until like just now at the end. And I think that really is pretty much everything I wanted to say about this game. It's probably like a 3-hour video at this point. Um, so if you watch the whole thing, I have no idea how you did that, but congratulations. And if you're interested in seeing more of this kind of just talking, or if you're interested in me like making more content that isn't as thought out as my other videos, that's not to say I would stop making those. Absolutely not. I would never stop making those. But if you like hearing my voice and just want to hear my opinion on some stuff now and then, I'm happy to make these videos. I'd like to get a capture card. I would have loved to be like um, having Zelda playing in the background while I have this video going, but I don't have a capture card. I play this game downstairs, and I'd also like to get a better mic that I can walk around with so that you can understand me better. And I'd also like to get a webcam, maybe like a better camera, so that maybe I could even just have my face. Anything besides what's probably going to happen in this video, which is just going to be like a picture. But this is kind of a podcast. I imagine 90% of the people watching this are just going to turn it on and then clean their house or something. So, but with that said, I think that's going to be it for now. Those are my opinions. What are your opinions? I'm curious to see some conversation on all of these things or any of these things. So thanks for listening. Till next time. Okay, so it's been several days since I last recorded a segment of this, and this is getting unbelievably long, so I'm going to try to wrap it up now. I'm not saying it's going to not take a little bit longer, but I have a list here of the things I haven't mentioned yet, and so yeah, let's just continue doing that. I was going to mention more about the lack of tools, or the apparent lack of tools, and why I think that there actually are just as many tools in this game as any other Zelda game. They're just kind of hidden or more interwoven into the controls than the usual. So, as far as what you get on your Sheikah Slate, these are the main tools that the game knows that you will always have. There are 5 of those. 5, yeah, 5, and I've explained what those are already. And they're all multifaceted and they're all really cool. Let's talk about what might be missing, though. Like, what kind of tools from other Zelda games aren't here that are conspicuous? First is the bow and arrow, but that is there. That's wired to your the right R2 button. You'll always have bows, so that's a thing you'll always have, and the game can always expect you to do that, and you will be using bows to solve lots of puzzles. There's also a mechanic that's in some Zelda games, but not all, which is some kind of gliding mechanic. And you have a paraglider, and that's also wired to a button. If you jump, and there's a jump button in this Zelda game, it's practically not even a fucking Zelda game anymore with a jump button, right? But yeah, there is a jump button, and if you press the jump button after the jump button, then you'll activate a paraglider, which would have been an inventory slot in something like the Wind Waker, right? So there's another tool that you'll always have. What else is missing? Well, the boomerang I mentioned is there. A lot of people might mention that there's something along the lines of like a Mask of Truth. That's something that's a lot in a lot of Zelda games, something along those lines. And I would argue that even that is kind of there. I mentioned I would talk more about like the scanning. When you first like tap L to bring up whatever tool you have selected, whatever Sheikah Slate tool. So either excluding bombs. So either like cryonis, the thing that makes you freeze liquids. Either that or the telekinesis or the magnesis or the stasis. Every time you press that button, it kind of changes the environment around you and brings up like this kind of scanning HUD that highlights things that you can interact with on the ground. And I would argue that kind of satisfies whatever Mask of Truth a Zelda game would typically have. Because what does the Mask of Truth really allow you to do as a tool in a Zelda game? It allows you to see things that aren't there that help you solve puzzles, or point things out that you wouldn't have noticed otherwise, and that's exactly what this scanning system does. You'll find yourself very quickly in this game using that to try to find things that you can interact with in order to solve puzzles. So there you have it. Those are my incredibly long-winded thoughts on Zelda. This is me a few days in the future, and I just feel like I should say a few things that while I was editing together and kind of like just deleting parts that were worthless and rearranging a few things to make this podcast slightly more presentable. I noticed a couple of things that I meant to say but forgot about. The first thing I forgot to mention was the enemy AI. I said I would talk about that and I didn't. I think it's amazing. Like I don't know if it's like I don't know if it's like a technological achievement. Like I don't think the enemy AI is something that's like new to video games as like programming goes, but it's just incredibly varied. There aren't that many different enemies in this game. There's a lot of different versions of the same enemies, and the reason they did that is so that they could give the enemies so many different behaviors. For the first like 20 hours of this game or so, I kept on. I swear to God, I saw bokoblins do something new every single time I fought them. It's amazing. Like Video Game Donkey is like the only funny person on YouTube I watch. If you watch his Zelda video, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Like, there's some really surprising, funny things in it. So I just wanted to acknowledge the game for doing something really cool with that. Secondly, um, I wanted to mention something that was very disappointing to me, which was the Wii U gamepad. Um, in fact, actually, King K has a hour and a half long, much better put together Zelda analysis than this one. Um, he criticizes. I haven't watched the whole thing, but he seems to be criticizing a lot of different things than I did, so that's nice that I'm not completely redundant at this point. I did film this before that video came out, though. Um, but the one thing that he doesn't mention about the Wii U gamepad not being used at all that I wanted to point out was the the Divine Beasts themselves would have been way cooler if the Wii U gamepad gave you the map, because I think the idea behind them was that you could actually like press a button on the gamepad and then manipulate them instead of going into the map screen. It doesn't sound like much, but that manipulation of the beasts themselves being done without going into a pause screen, just by like pressing a button on the gamepad, like that's on your map, that's on your actual physical Sheikah slate that Link has. I think that would have been really cool. And that's definitely a missed opportunity. There's a ton of missed opportunities. Zelda, like of all games, could have benefited a ton from the Wii U gamepad, and they didn't, and they obviously did it to make it not seem obsolete or not seem like it had things that the Switch version didn't, so that people would want to buy the Switch without feeling like they were missing out. And I think that's really sad because the Wii U, when the thing was first being showcased, like they had this demo of this Zelda game where they had like items in your inventory and stuff you could do on the Wii U gamepad, and it seemed great. Like that was like a proof of concept for this system, and a Zelda game never actually came out on it that took advantage of those things. So that sucks. But anyway, those are the only 2 points that are worth making that I forgot about. I'm sure I forgot about all sorts of other stuff, but I'm gonna stop here because this video is already way too long. So if you listened to this whole thing, um, send me your address and I will send you a medal. But thanks for watching. I'll see you in a much better put together video than this one. I'm not actually going to send you a medal. That was a joke. I don't have money.